Chapter 513. Beside the fire pit, the shaman stood there with a slight sneer on his face. He listened carefully to the sounds of battle, but didn't move. There wasn't a single Wancher person beside him. The closest one was 50 meters away. With the Wancher fire pit as the center, there was no one but the shaman within a 50-meter radius. Inside the fire pit, a gray flame flickered. That was the color of the Wancher fire seed. The Wancher shaman was worried when he saw the fire seed in the fire pit being suppressed into a small ball. However, as the Flaming Horn's fire seed disappeared, the fire seed in the Wancher tribe's fire pit glowed again. It lost its opponent and returned to normal, just like how it was before the Flaming Horn tribe came here. This made the Wancher shaman feel less worried, and he felt more at ease. He didn't know why Yin Jiao's fire seed disappeared while Yin Jiao's warriors retained their original abilities. But he knew that without the suppression of Yin Jiao's fire seed, Wancher's fire seed could unleash 100% of its power. What was there to fear if the Yin Jiao tribe attacked? Yin Jiao didn't have a fire seed, but Wancher's fire seed was still there. Wancher wasn't one of those small tribes that had to worry about survival. The power of the fire seed was the strongest. The Wancher shaman could not think of anyone who could extinguish the fire seed of Wancher, not even the slave masters. Did they want to wipe out Wancher? Yin Jiao was delusional. Yin Jiao had been down and out for 1,000 years. Even their thinking had become simple, naive. If Yin Jiao's fire seed was still there, he could be careful. But the Yin Jiao people had dug their own graves and destroyed their fire seed. Ha ha ha. The shaman wanted to laugh. A war between the tribes was a war between fire seeds. Why didn't Yin Jiao understand? Without their fire seed, how could they fight with them? As the Wancher shaman thought about it, the sneer on his face deepened. Hearing the sound, he raised his hand, and the fire seed in the fire pit behind him suddenly jumped up, swaying on its own without any wind, making banging sounds. However, it did not sound like the usual sounds, but more like the collision between rocks. When Xiao Xian finally arrived, he saw this strange scene. Different from the tight defense around the fire pit, there were less than 300 Wancher warriors here. Wancher claimed to have more than 10,000 people, but in reality, there weren't that many. Even if you counted those who couldn't fight, there were at most 7,000 or 8,000. But if you counted the slave masters and slaves, there were indeed more than 10,000 people. In addition, there were prisoners of war captured by Wancher. There were hundreds of them still alive. With more than 10,000 people, they were indeed considered a large tribe here. If Wancher hadn't gone out to attack the smaller tribes often and lost many people, they would have even more people. This time, Yin Jiao sent 5,000 people to attack Wancher. Wancher had more warriors who could fight, plus the slaves of the slave masters who helped them, than Yin Jiao. But at this time, if someone looked carefully, they would find that Yin Jiao's casualties were much lower than Wancher's. Xiao Xian had a clear feeling when he was killing his way here. Therefore, when he saw that there were only 300 people guarding the fire pit, he was really surprised. Moreover, these 300 people weren't close to the fire pit. They had completely cleared out a large area around the fire pit. There were more than 100 Yin Jiao warriors who had arrived with Xiao Xian, and more were coming. It wasn't difficult to deal with the 300 people. Among these 300 people, there were no leaders or team leaders. At most, there were 1 or 2 team leaders. But here, Xiao Xian had a strange feeling. The others also felt the strong repulsion and strangeness of the Wancher fire seed. Xiao Xian didn't rush to the fire pit immediately. He only dealt with the 3 million Wancher stone men outside. He also stopped the other Yin Jiao warriors who wanted to rush forward. These 300 Wancher warriors didn't seem to want to fight Xiao Xian. After fighting for a while, they retreated to the fire pit. They didn't want to use the fire pit to improve their strength, but Xiao Xian felt that their behavior was more like luring the Yin Jiao people to the fire pit. Would anyone lure people from other tribes to their own fire pit? There had to be something wrong within the 50-meter gap. Xiao Xian didn't need to say more. The other Yin Jiao people could guess. Therefore, they only fought with the Wancher warriors outside the 50-meter circle. The Wancher shaman stood by the fire pit. seeing more and more Yin Jiao people gathering but not approaching. He didn't have the patience to wait any longer. A cruel smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. He raised his arm, raised his head, and let out a long howl. Then, Xiao Xian heard some words that Xiao Xian did not understand. If he had heard it before, he would have thought that it was just some meaningless syllables. However, at this moment, Xiao Xian felt a strong sense of danger. "Retreat!" Xiao Xian shouted. Hearing Xiao Xian's words, Tu all and the others paused, and then retreated some distance away from the fire pit. "Retreat again! Stay away!" Xiao Xian continued shouting. The Yin Jiao people wanted to retreat. Just now, there were too many Yin Jiao people and some Wancher people who rushed over. At this time, a strange scene occurred. The Yin Jiao people wanted to leave the fire pit, but the Wancher people didn't let them and kept blocking them. Bang! Bang! More and more urgent and loud sounds came from the Wancher fire pit. The grayish flame rose from the fire pit and filled it up. A column of flame suddenly shot up into the sky, like a volcanic eruption, spurting out balls of flame. The ball of fire that shot out from the pillar of fire tumbled in the air. At that moment, it seemed as if it wanted to cover the entire sky above. It carried with it the power to destroy the heavens and the earth as it came crashing down with a whistling sound. The Yin Jiao people who saw this broke out in cold sweat. They were the first group of Yin Jiao people to come here and were the closest to the fire pit. For the old soldiers, this was their first time attacking another tribe. For the people who came back from the other side, this was their first time attacking a tribe with a primitive fire seed. No matter which side they were from, they had never encountered such a situation before. The fire seed was too powerful. In front of this power, they felt like they were facing a king beast. No, not even a king beast would feel this much pressure. Staying there under such circumstances was simply courting death. Even if Chief Ao and Zheng Luo were here, they would run away first. The Wancher shaman, standing by the fire pit, grinned. The sound coming from his mouth was even louder. 50 meters? How could it only be 50 meters? That was just a facade made by the Wancher people. The power of the fire seed was far more than 50 meters. Fortunately, Xiao Xian shouted in advance. The Yin Jiao people retreated quickly. The injured who could not run fast enough were carried by their companions. The others covered them as they ran. Boom, boom, boom. The sound of the balls of fire crashing down was like an angry roar spreading into the distance. They were clearly just balls of fire, but when these balls of fire hit the ground, they were like heavy boulders falling to the ground. The ground trembled clearly, and in the blink of an eye, it became intense, and the earth trembled along with it. The fireball started near the fire pit and quickly spread outwards. The fireballs were like giant rocks that fell to the ground, leaving behind a gray patch. Through these gray fireballs, one could vaguely see the shadow of the Wancher shaman standing on the other side of the fire pit. Near the fire pit, the ground was covered in a layer of gray balls of fire. A second layer was piling up. The balls of fire looked like they were going to build a towering mountain. The balls of fire fell too quickly. With the Wancher people blocking them, the first group of Yin Jiao warriors could not run out of the range of the balls of fire in time. The warriors running outside could feel the pressure coming from behind. It was like a cold current was rapidly approaching. The hairs on the back of their necks stood on end. They did not look up to see what was happening, but they could feel the weight of a mountain crashing down on them. The ground felt like it was going to collapse. The impact of the foreign tribe's fire seed still restricted the Flaming Horn warriors' mobility. It was obviously more difficult for them to run. They were panting heavily and their faces were pale. However, they could clearly feel the greater restriction. It was more difficult for them to move their legs. The shadow of death loomed over the heads of the Yin Jiao warriors closest to the fire pit. Behind them were countless gray balls of fire. Every ball of fire smashed down with the force of a thunderbolt. It was like they were going to crush the people on the ground. Above their heads was an inescapable shadow. The shadow was spreading at a terrifying speed, as if it was going to cut off all escape routes. In the sky, the gray balls of fire that had spread out blocked the morning sun. They brought with them an unending desolate aura that pressed down. The surging air was filled with a bone-piercing chill. This was the last defense of the Wanshur tribe. It was also the strongest defense of the entire Wanshur tribe. No wonder the Wanshur leader believed in the power of the fire seed so much. To the tribesmen, the fire seed was the most sacred and powerful thing. The fire seed was synonymous with the power of heaven and earth. The Wanshur people believed that no one could break through this defense unless a more powerful fire seed collided with it. But now, under the deep-rooted belief that the fire seed was rooted in the fire pit, which tribe would be willing to bring the fire seed out? They had dared to set up camp outside the fearsome beast forest because they believed that even if the beasts came out of the forest, they would avoid their tribe because of the fire seed. Their fire seed might not be as strong as the old masters, but at this moment, in this place, their fire seed was the strongest. It was the god that ruled everything. The slave masters did not choose to support the Wanshur tribe randomly. They had their reasons. The reason why those smart slave owners chose the Wanshur tribe was that the Wanshur tribe had the potential to become a powerful tribe. Chapter 514. The Wanshur tribe was called Wanshur because the fire seed was born in 10,000 stones. 10,000 stones formed a mountain, and the fire seed of the Wanshur tribe was born in them. On the other side of the gray flames, the shaman was a blurry figure. Because of the swaying of the flames and the swirling of the air, his figure looked distorted and strange. Although he couldn't see the shaman clearly, Xiao Xian could hear the maniacal laughter coming from the fire pit. Ha ha ha! Who told you Yin Jiao people to not have a fire seed? Without it, let's see how you Yin Jiao people will fight me. Boom! Boom! Balls of gray flames smashed onto the ground, creating a commotion similar to that of a meteor crashing to the ground, not giving anyone any time to breathe. The third layer of flames was already being built near the fire pit. The Yinjiao warriors carrying the wounded felt their bodies quickly becoming tired. The veins on their foreheads pulsed, and large drops of sweat slid down their bodies. From the beginning until now, they had run less than 100 meters. Under normal circumstances, it would have taken them only a breath. But here, at this moment, they felt like they were deeply trapped in a torrent. Every step they took was against the flow, and it was extremely difficult. The warriors on the side felt the same. They attacked fiercely, but they felt much of their strength being reduced. They felt weak and powerless. If not for the Yinjiao strength, they would have been able to hold on for a while after being suppressed. If it had been anyone else, they would have been attacked by the Wanshur people long ago. Watch out! A large ball of gray flames smashed into the people there. The gray flames in the sky covered a large area and spread too quickly. They had no time to run. Even if they avoided this one, they couldn't avoid the other balls of fire. The 10 or so warriors gathered together and could only take it head-on. Seeing the gray flame smashing down, they could only raise the weapons in their hands as if to block it. The gray flames passed through the swords, spears, axes, and rods, passed through the bodies of the warriors, and smashed into the ground with a thunderous boom. The ground under their feet trembled for a long time. Although the flames passed through the warriors' bodies and did not cause any visible damage, the Flaming Horn warriors felt like they were being crushed by a giant boulder. Their entire bodies felt like they were trapped inside, and there was a strong pressure all around them. Even their blood vessels felt like they were being crushed. Above their heads, there was even more pressure that made them panic. It was like giant boulders were falling down, and the boulders were piling up at a rapid pace. His heart felt like it was being squeezed by someone, and his heartbeat lost its usual rhythm. His lungs felt like they were frozen, and every breath he took was extremely difficult. His strength was decreasing rapidly, and the totem power in his body was like a hibernating animal encountering cold weather. He felt drowsy. The pressure was still increasing, and it was difficult for them to stand. The situation was not good. It wasn't just the Flaming Horn warriors who were trapped. Even the slave masters who were hiding in the periphery were terrified. Although they weren't trapped, the power of the fire seed terrified them. They could easily enslave a slave who didn't have any fire seed energy, but it was extremely difficult to control a warrior with awakened totemic powers. This was the power of the fire seed and the conflict between fire seeds. The slave masters were all descendants of tribesmen with fire seeds. After a long time, they became slave masters. They also had fire seeds in their bodies. The war between fire seeds was just like the war between humans. It never subsided. Some of the slave masters who had wanted to attack the Wanshur tribe when they escaped the desert were now secretly glad that they didn't do anything. If the Wanshur tribe had been forced to use the power of the fire seed, they would have suffered the same fate as the Yinjiao warriors. Good thing we didn't do anything. Looks like the Yinjiao won't get away with it this time. I hope the Wanshur people can take this opportunity to destroy the Yinjiao tribe. Those who didn't think highly of the Wanshur tribe now changed their minds. A slave master on the side rolled his eyes and whispered, "Why don't we take this opportunity to help the Wanshur tribe?" The person who said this was the young master of Skywheel City, who didn't think highly of the Wanshur tribe before. Now that the situation had improved, he had another idea. That makes sense. Let's go. There were others who had the same idea. They took the slaves in their hands and walked towards the battlefield. Xiao Xian was also trapped in the gray flames of the Wanshur tribe. He could clearly feel his power being suppressed, but compared to others, he was still much more flexible. Seeing more and more Yinjiao warriors being enveloped, Xiao Xian's heart skipped a beat. He shouted, "Gather together, everyone. Don't spread out too far. The more the better. The people are here. The fire seed is here. Don't be afraid." The Wanshur shaman said Yinjiao had no fire seed. How could there be no fire seed? The people were here, the fire seed was here, but it was no longer in its original form. Xiao Xian pulled the scattered Yinjiao warriors back to where the troops were gathered. He flicked away a blade and kicked the Wanshur man in the chest, kicking him away. Without stopping, he went straight to the troops gathered not far away. They were the first to follow him. Now, they couldn't run out of the range of the Wanshur fire seed's flames. After hearing Xiao Xian's words, the Yinjiao warriors who had rushed out began to rush back in and gather together. Even if they ran out, they couldn't outrun the fire seed's speed. This was their first time facing such a powerful fire seed. They were inexperienced and panicked. Xiao Xian's words were like a beacon of light to them. Whether or not Xiao Xian's words were useful, their first reaction was to do as he said. After gathering, the Yinjiao warriors felt much more relaxed. The fading totemic patterns on their bodies showed up again. The fire seed's power seemed to have broken through the ice and started to recover. It worked. Yes, when they merged with the fire seed, the shaman also said that the fire seed was here as long as the people were here. At the time, they only thought it was a consolation of faith, but they didn't understand it fully. But now, they deeply understood the meaning of this sentence. The fire seed merged into their bodies and burned, never extinguished. One person's power was limited, and the fire seed was small. But when more people gathered, it was like sparks coming together to form a ball of fire. When the fire gathered together, it would become a raging inferno. Xiao Xian's words were spread. Duo Kong, Gigu, Ta, and the others gathered the people around them. Ao and Zhengluo, who rushed over later, also made arrangements for the people. The people were like disconnected dots that gradually connected. Because of the war, they didn't form a tight line or a tight circle, but they formed a battle line. As more and more people joined the battle line, under the mountainous pressure of the Wanshur fire seed, this battle line was like a red hunting knife, cutting into the enemy. The pressure from the Wanshur fire seed lessened. Even though the flames above them had accumulated to a terrifying height, the Yinjiao people had lost their fear of it. On the contrary, as the fire seed's power in their bodies became more active, their intention to fight back became more obvious. The shaman was right. In a war of this level, it was not easy to completely destroy the other side. If they really went on, it would be a battle between the fire seeds. So far, no tribe had brought their fire seed out to fight. This was one of the reasons why the Wanshur tribe was so fearless. But now, Yinjiao's actions shocked the shaman. Why? Why was there Yinjiao's fire seed's aura here? Wasn't Yinjiao's fire seed gone? It wasn't there before. Bringing the fire seed out to fight? Were the Yinjiao people crazy? Where was it? Where was Yinjiao's fire seed? The Wanshi shaman carefully sensed all the fire seed auras in his territory. However, he realized that the flaming horn fire seed's aura was everywhere in Wanshi's territory. The aura wasn't strong, but they were all connected together. The twisting lines of fire seemed to want to split this newly built mountain apart. The aura of the two fire seeds was colliding. Whether it was the Yinjiao warriors, or the Wanshi warriors, or the nearby slave masters, they could all feel this change. The slave masters who had originally intended to help Wanshi found that the situation had reversed once again. Their minds were uncertain, so they temporarily suspended their actions and stayed not far from the battlefield to watch. If Wanshi continued to gain the upper hand, it would not be too late for them to make a move. Beside the fire pit, the shaman's eyes were full of disbelief. How could this be? What did the Yinjiao people do? Xiao Xian picked up an injured Yinjiao warrior who was about to die and carried him on his shoulder. The warrior's injuries weren't too serious, but he couldn't hold on under the pressure of the Wanshi fire seed. He was too far away from everyone when they were fighting the Wanshi people. When Xiao Xian told everyone to retreat, they didn't notice him and couldn't take him with them. Seeing that most of the Yinjiao people had gathered together, but Xiao Xian was the exception, the shaman came back to his senses. He glared at Xiao Xian fiercely, the gray totemic patterns making his twisted expression look even more ferocious. I don't care what you do. I'll bury you all here. You'll be crushed bones under the Wanshi volcano. A beam of fire shot out from the fire pit, gathered in the air, and smashed down on Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian felt as if there was a powerful force above his head, as if the sky was collapsing. He didn't have time to think too much, so he threw the person on his shoulder towards the direction of the group. In the next moment, an enormous pressure came crashing down like an avalanche from a tall mountain. Xiao Xian felt his muscles and bones creak under the pressure, as if he was bearing the weight of a mountain. The gray flames grew thicker, blocking out most of the light. It was as if night had fallen. Chapter 5:15. Xiao Xian. Xian, how are you? Someone shouted anxiously from the group. However, because of the dense gray flames, their vision was blocked and they could not see clearly. Especially where Xiao Xian was, it was the spot where the shaman had exerted most of his strength. Xiao Xian knew that the attack had been aimed at him. Even through the gray flames, Xiao Xian could feel the Wanshi shaman's venomous gaze on the other side of the flames. Xiao Xian was the leader of the first group to attack this place. How could the Wanshi shaman not hate him? Moreover, the Wanshi shaman had seen Xiao Xian before. In the desert, when he was still with the young master of Baishur City, he had seen Xiao Xian and Ta. He had even helped to set up a trap to capture Ta and Lei. However, things had developed beyond his expectations. From then on, Xiao Xian had been listed as one of the most important people to be wary of. Now that he saw Xiao Xian again, the Wanshi shaman was afraid. Since he couldn't kill those people in one go, he had to crush this extremely threatening brat first. Above them, the fireballs that had been piled up like a mountain continued to increase. In this place, the fireballs were increasing the fastest, not above the Yinjiao group, but above Xiao Xian's head. Earlier, Xiao Xian had been able to run and save a few injured people. However, now, Xiao Xian felt as if there was a mountain on top of his head. He could not even turn around, let alone walk or run. Whoosh! 2 steps away, an arrow flew in. However, because of the fire seed's flames, or because the other party could not see the target's exact location, the arrow had missed. Someone wanted to use this opportunity to kill Xiao Xian. Under the fire seed's flames, and within such a killing formation, it would take a lot of effort for someone outside to shoot accurately. Xiao Xian could feel the Wanshi people approaching. They probably felt that the Yinjiao group was not easy to deal with, so they changed their target. After all, there were too many Yinjiao people there. When they gathered together, the Yinjiao fire seed's power made the Wanshi people uncomfortable. The Wanshi people could not see Xiao Xian's situation clearly, but they could feel that there was someone not from the Wanshi tribe here. Who else could they attack but him? Realizing the situation, Xiao Xian knew he could not wait any longer. He moved his arms with all his might, trying to break free from this almost frozen feeling. Here, other than the immense pressure from above, Xiao Xian felt the same as when he first met the king's stoneworm. It was as if every part of his body was turning into stone, out of his control. If he could not break through this resistance, he would die. Xiao Xian could feel the Yinjiao group trying to get closer. If it was just one or a few people, they would not be able to save him because they could not withstand the Wancher Fire Seed's power. Crack. A sound like the cracking of a rock suddenly rang out. Crack, crack, crack. The cracking sound grew louder and louder. It began to come from everywhere around him. The obstacles were gradually pushed away. The pressure in all directions was weakening. His body was becoming less tired. Cracks appeared on the ground under his feet. When the flames pressed down from above, there were no footprints on the ground. But now, as the pressure from above weakened, there was a dent in the ground. This was caused by Xiao Xian's explosive strength. His slowed heartbeat sped up. Xiao Xian took a deep breath, as if to expel all the pressure. Then he inhaled sharply and let out a long roar. Following the roar, the flames on Xiao Xian's body surged wildly. They pierced through the gray flames, surrounding him like a fire dragon, breaking free of its shackles. Without turning around, Xiao Xian swung his arm. The blade, reflecting the flames, swept out. The tip of the sword was 2 palms away from the 3 Wancher people. But the sword aura was as sharp as a blade, easily cutting their throats. After attacking Xiao Xian, the Wancher shaman had wanted to wait for Xiao Xian to be crushed to death by the Wancher Fire Seed's power. Then he would focus the Fire Seed's power on the others. But as he waited, he realized something was wrong. A drop of sweat dripped from his forehead. The shaman stared at Xiao Xian. At this time, Xiao Xian looked up. The shaman seemed to see through the layers of flames and saw Xiao Xian's shining eyes. "Stop him! Stop him!" The shaman's terrified voice was piercing and piercing. It spread everywhere. At this time, no one cared about the shaman's voice. They were confused. What had happened to make the shaman so terrified? Something happened to the fire pit. The scattered Wancher people gathered in the direction of the shaman's voice. Xiao Xian stepped forward. His step made a thud on the ground. It was comparable to the sound of the Wancher Fire Seed's fireball crashing down. After getting rid of his exhaustion, Xiao Xian felt as if his body was filled with endless energy. With every step he took, that energy doubled. His steps gradually sped up, but his footsteps became lighter and lighter. The sound of his footsteps weakened, and each step he left on the ground was shallower than the previous one, until there were no footprints left, and only the soft rustling of the short grass on the ground could be heard. He swung his sword. It broke through the layers of gray flames and pierced the chest of a Wancher man who was about to shoot an arrow. Xiao Xian was still approaching Wancher's fire pit, faster and faster. The Wancher people who rushed over could not stop him in time. When they got close, they could feel a strong, repulsive force. It was like another tribe's fire seed was burning here. The Wancher shaman felt like he was facing a ferocious beast that had gone berserk with flames all over its body. Why was Xiao Xian able to break through the fire seed suppression? Why was Xiao Xian able to move freely under the fire seed suppression? The shaman did not want to think about it now. His mind was clouded by a possibility that he did not want to think about. This thought made him feel like he had fallen into an ice cave. At this moment, the Wancher shaman regretted not arranging more guards here. Then he realized with a start that he was doubting the fire seed of his tribe. Could the fire seed stop this person? This time, he lost his confidence. Even the guards could not stop Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian was too fast. The shaman's vision was not affected by the gray flames. At this moment, all the gray flames in his vision faded. Everything around him became clear. There seemed to be a voice in his head telling him what to do. The shaman watched as Xiao Xian approached. He thought Xiao Xian's target was him. However, just as he was about to die, he realized that Xiao Xian had jumped 10 steps away from him. He jumped over his head and charged towards the fire pit behind him. The shaman's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He could not believe that this person's target was the fire seed. He wanted to destroy the fire seed all by himself. Lunatic. This was a lunatic. If Yinjiao's fire seed was here, it might be possible. However, he was the only one here. Could he represent Yinjiao's fire seed? The shaman had never heard of anyone who could fight a large tribe's fire seed alone. Jumping in meant death. But soon, the shaman felt a pressure that made his heart stop beating. It pressed down from above and made him collapse on the ground. Xiao Xian jumped into the air and raised his hand to slap at the flames spewing out from the fire pit. His palm passed through the gray flames as if it was brushing against cold rocks. This palm seemed to be infinitely enlarged. It felt as if the palm could cover the entire fire pit. Under this palm, it was like another world. There seemed to be electricity flashing under the palm. It was like a flash of light from the collision of clouds under the endless sky. Every time this palm pressed down, a portion of the gray flame mountain formed by the 10,000 stone stacks would crumble. The cracked gray flames exploded like rolling thunder. The air surged wildly like an avalanche sweeping down from the top of a mountain, setting off a deafening roar. The towering mountain that was unshakable like a giant trembled and collapsed. Everyone in the Wanxer tribe could feel this shocking change. At this moment, everyone who was fighting stopped what they were doing and tensed up to feel this change. In Xiao Xian's mind, the white light shield grew brighter. An unparalleled power was suddenly released. His palm pressed down again with the power to destroy the world. The battle of the tribes, the struggle for the fire seed, the battle of life and death. The others' despair, my glory. From now on, there would be no more Wanxer. Yinjiao would return to the peak. Destroy for me. Rumble. The mountain collapsed as if the world was splitting apart. The deafening roar of splitting mountains and splitting rocks was deafening, and even the air seemed to be continuously exploding. The wind blew wildly as if to kill everything. The mountain that the Wanxer people thought was indestructible, the sturdiest and most reliable guard, the most powerful mountain of fire seeds, was heading towards its end, just like their crumbling faith. The sound shook the heavens and the earth. It was as if waves had been set off. Wave after wave, it spread far and wide. Even the people who had taken refuge in the forest could hear it clearly. In the lush forest, flocks of birds flew away in fright. Beasts roared and ran further away. When the roar finally subsided, the gray mountain of fire above the Wanxer tribe had disappeared. Like a thick fog being blown away, everything became clear. Yangguang at noon was dazzling. The warm light shone on the earth. However, in such a lively and noisy world, it seemed to be frozen. Everything was silent. Chapter 516. Everyone was dumbfounded by this sudden change. What had happened? Actually, everyone knew what had happened. They just didn't believe it. An injured Yinjiao warrior was holding a weapon. He had been planning to fight to the death with the Wanxer people, but now he felt that his opponent had disappeared. It wasn't that the person in front of him had disappeared. Instead, the person standing there was like a puppet that had lost its soul. His face was ashen, his eyes were empty, and his face was lifeless. He stood there like a stone, still maintaining the posture of listening. If it wasn't for the muscles on his face twitching rapidly, others might really think that this person had turned into a stone. This person was no longer a threat. The Yinjiao people didn't even want to attack. It was like encountering a fierce beast during a hunt. But as they fought, the fierce beast suddenly turned into a toothless little beast. They could kill it with a single stab. This feeling was too strange, so much so that for a moment, no one wanted to continue fighting. The pressure that had been pressing down on him all this while had disappeared along with the collapse of the formation. They could no longer feel the rejection from the fire seed. The Flaming Horn tribesmen could no longer feel any resistance from the fire seed. The torrent-like obstruction dissipated with the wind. All of this had happened too suddenly. Such a drastic change had sent them from heaven to hell in an instant. It was so fast that no one was prepared for it. What happened? Duo Kong swallowed and looked at the other Yinjiao warriors beside him. In his past life, he was used to living without a primitive fire seed. Hence, he wasn't as sensitive to it as the people of the old haunt. After sensing the changes around him, he had a guess, but he didn't dare to say it out loud. It was too hard to believe. "I think Wansher's fire seed is gone?" Tao Zheng asked tentatively. He couldn't believe it either. Gone just like that? That was a primitive fire seed. It was known as the most powerful force in a tribe. A small tribe wasn't that powerful, but Wansher was a large tribe. Their fire seed could suppress everyone so much. It was obvious how powerful it was. The power of fire seeds was also divided into strong and weak. In fact, after sensing the power of the myriad stone fire seed, the leaders decided to ignore the myriad stone fire seed for the time being and wipe out the myriad stone fire seed first. After that, they would mobilize the entire team to target the myriad stone fire seed. Otherwise, they would seek help from the shaman after this battle. They were all prepared to fight for a long time. Who would have thought that something like this would happen? Under the power of such a powerful Wansher fire seed, there was actually someone who could destroy it? At this time, everyone was thinking, who destroyed it? On the side of the Wansher tribe, they were all like walking corpses. This sudden huge blow completely destroyed their psychological defense line. They didn't want to believe the possibility in their hearts, but the totemic power in their bodies was disappearing. This change was very obvious. The disappearance of power was accompanied by endless exhaustion. The weapons in their hands became heavier and heavier, and their legs seemed to be tied to boulders. It was difficult to move. The soreness in his muscles and the pain from the wounds all over his body became clearer and clearer. The totem tattoos on his body were fading and disappearing. Like firewood that had burned to the end, the flames would die out and the wood would turn to ashes. Turning their necks mechanically, they looked in the direction of the fire pit. Without the gray flames blocking their vision under the clear sky, they could see clearly. Over at the fire pit, there was no fire seed flame. The power that had been protecting them had disappeared without a trace. They knew all too well what this meant. After all, they had wiped out other tribes and seen the fate of those tribes after their fire seeds were destroyed. Thinking of the tribes they had wiped out, the wanderers who lived miserable lives, and the slaves who were at the mercy of others, they had always understood the cruelty of this world. The strong preyed on the weak. But in the past, they had stood in the position of the butcher. Now, they were meat under the butcher's knife. They were like birds without an umbrella, about to be bombarded by the cruel storm outside. Yangguang was warm at noon, but under this sky, everyone in the Wansher tribe felt an unprecedented chill. This was a psychological chill that chilled them to the bone. It was much colder than a bucket of ice water in the middle of winter, but there was nothing they could do. They could only shiver with the cold invading their bodies. By the fire pit, the Wansher shaman's lips moved. He wanted to say something, but no sound came out. It was as if someone had grabbed his throat. He could not make a sound. How could this be? How could this be? The Wansher shaman kept thinking about this sentence. A person was squatting in the fire pit of Wansher. A Yinjiao. At this moment, the person's hand was pressed against the center where the fire seed usually burned. The Wansher shaman stared fixedly at the hand that was stuck there. His gaze seemed to penetrate the hand and see if there would be more gray flames under the palm. Rumble. A small stone rolled, making a soft sound. The hand in the fire pit moved. Xiao Xian stood up slowly. He raised his hand and looked at the fire pit. This fire pit was dead. From now on, there would be no more fire seeds burning. A figure rushed over. Xiao Xian did not stop him. He watched as the Wansher shaman ran over. He could not stand properly and fell to his knees. Then he dug with his hands like a madman, trying to dig something out of the ground. Stone after stone was dug out. Below was ordinary stone soil. That was all. Impossible. Impossible. The Wansher shaman's hands were bleeding. He screamed hysterically. Then he looked at Xiao Xian. His eyes were filled with hatred and madness, but also some fear. Then he seemed to have made a decision. He pulled out a metal dagger and jumped up to stab at Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian just looked at him calmly, then stretched out 2 fingers and pinched the dagger that was coming towards him. It was a simple action, but it brought the one sure shaman back to reality. He had lost his strength. If he still had his strength, even if he was not a powerful warrior, he would not be so weak. His opponent could pinch him with 2 fingers. The one sure shaman did not let go of the dagger. He tried to push it forward, but the dagger did not budge. It was as if there was a solid wall in front of him. He could not move forward. Looking up at Xiao Xian's eyes, he realized that there was a strange light in Xiao Xian's eyes. Although the Wan Sure fire seed was gone, the shaman still had some senses. He could feel that Xiao Xian's power was different from Wan Shure's, Yin Jiao's, or any other tribe's. Was that really the fire seed's power? Thinking of Xiao Xian's hopeless jump and slap, the shaman kept replaying the scene in his mind. That was not the power of a normal tribesman. Definitely not. "Who are you?" the shaman muttered. Xiao Xian did not speak. "Who are you? Who are you?" Ignoring the shaman's screams, Xiao Xian flicked his fingers and pushed the dagger away. "You're asking me? How would I know?" Xiao Xian knew what the shaman was asking, but Xiao Xian could not answer. The shaman had said that to destroy the Wan Sure fire seed, he had to follow the instructions of the fire seed in his body. He might also need to gather totemic power and inheritance power. However, at that moment, the power in his body was not Yin Jiao's fire seed, but that strange power. Ever since he came to this world, Xiao Xian had never figured out what that power was. Why was he brought here? But later, he learned that the power was related to the fire seed. It was not just Yin Jiao's fire seed, but also the fire seeds of other tribes. Xiao Xian looked the same as the other children in the tribe, but his awakening was different. Xiao Xian once brought back the stone given by the crocodile of the drumming tribe, but turned out to be a water moon stone. It was said that only the drumming tribe could produce this kind of stone. Xiao Xian once went to the rain tribe. It was said that the ritual of praying for rain, which had not succeeded for thousands of years, succeeded. All of this was related to the power that brought him here. What kind of power was it? Xiao Xian could not tell. Turning around, Xiao Xian walked towards the direction of the tribe. There was no need to continue this battle. The Wan Sure people gradually came to their senses. They had lost all their will to fight. When a Yin Jiao team took a step forward, they retreated far away. Some people screamed in fear and ran away. This was like a signal. More and more people ran away from the opposing sides. Although the slave masters were shocked that Wan Sure had been defeated much faster than they had expected, they were still satisfied with the current situation and the fate of the Wan Sure tribesmen. They wanted to recruit the tribe warriors who had lost their fire seeds. Because they once had power, after losing it, they would definitely want to regain it. This was the best chance for the slave masters to intervene. Recruit. The slave masters who had shrunk away were like beasts that smelled meat. They all stretched out their claws. The flaming horns realized something was wrong. If the slave masters weren't here, they would be fine. After destroying the Wan Sure fire seed, they had no interest in slaughtering the weak. However, with the slave masters here, it meant that the Wan Sure people could regain their power and seek revenge. How could this be? Kill them. Kill them. Don't let them escape with the slave masters. Kill both the slave and the slave master. Zheng Luo shouted. Although the slave masters here were not strong enough, he still had to be careful. The 3 team leaders led some Yin Jiao warriors to continue the chase. The 2 chiefs led the rest to clean up the battlefield, treat the injured, and count the dead. When Xiao Xian returned, he saw Caesar lying on the ground, curled up and licking its wounds. During the attack, Caesar and the others were mainly blocking the Wan Sure beasts. That was why they were not with Xiao Xian. There were many bite wounds on its body from sharp teeth. It was covered in blood, and there was a bloody hole on its back. It looked like someone had stabbed it with a spear. Hearing Xiao Xian's footsteps, Caesar's ears twitched. It stopped licking its wounds and turned to look at Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian's footsteps froze. One of Caesar's eyes was gone. Chapter 517. Some warriors ran over to treat Caesar's wounds. They belonged to the logistics category. During the attack, they were at the back of the team, but now they were running around to apply medicine to the wounded. Caesar knew the warrior and knew that he was one of them, so he didn't reject him and let him apply medicine to his wounds. There were many corpses of Wansure beasts on the ground, most of which were incomplete. The bite marks were very obvious, and some were even directly bitten off. The ground was covered with blood. The half-dried blood was sticky, and people walked on it, making a clattering sound. The pungent smell of blood was everywhere. Xiao Xian's tension gradually subsided, but the feeling of exhaustion became more and more obvious. The strength in his body was almost drained. He walked to Caesar and raised his hand to wipe off the blood flowing from its eyes. There were also scratches around its eyes. After checking Caesar's wounds, Xiao Xian patted it. "It's good that you're still alive." After that, Xiao Xian ignored the sticky blood on the ground and sat down directly, looking around at the battlefield. The paramedics with medicine were rescuing the wounded. Those who were seriously injured could survive as long as they could hold on. The tribe's totem warriors were very resilient. No matter whether their bodies were damaged or not, at least they were still alive. Not far away, the forest Rakos was lying on the ground with its belly facing the sky. Its feet had been tied with layers of grass and animal skins. Its feet should be injured, but no one knew how serious it was. There were many bleeding wounds on its body, and a paramedic was applying medicine to it. Generally speaking, the other beasts' injuries were different, but not much better than Caesar's. After all, facing the desperate attacks of the Wansure beasts, even if they were ferocious beasts, they couldn't stay intact. However, these ferocious beasts' resilience was not worse than that of the tribe's warriors. Caesar's wounds were so serious that it would only take a few days to recover. But its eyes couldn't recover. He raised his hand and patted Caesar's blood-stained hair again. "You did well." Caesar gently nudged Xiao Xian with his nose and then continued to rest on the ground. While Xiao Xian was observing the battlefield, the person who was applying medicine to Caesar glanced at Xiao Xian from time to time, then applied medicine to Caesar, and then looked at Xiao Xian. That warrior was curious. "I heard that Wanshure's fire seed was extinguished by an elder. How did the elder die?" Unfortunately, at that time, because of the gray flames, they were far away from the fire pit and could not see the situation over there. They could only feel that the gray flames enveloping them were collapsing one after another. When it was almost dusk, the three leaders returned with their men. They chased them for a long time until they could no longer catch up with the slave masters. Only then did they return. In the Wansure tribe, other than the Yinjiao people, there were only some prisoners of war that the Wansure tribe had captured. There were no other Wansure people alive. Now that the Wansure tribe was destroyed, the prisoners of war could not find a place to go. Ao Fong and the others who wanted to leave could leave. Those who did not could stay and live here like the other wanderers around Yinjiao. Of course, they had to work for it. But if they were found to have bad intentions, they could not blame the sword for being merciless. The children and women of the Wansure tribe had been sent away. This was done when they were preparing for war. When we chased them, we found an underground cave. The women and children of the Wansure tribe should have been there. But when we found it, there were no living people there. There were some old people's corpses in the cave. They were killed, but there were no women or children. Oh, there were also some slaves' corpses. The Wansure people should have been taken away by the slave masters, Gigu said to the two leaders. In a defeated tribe, the survivors would become prisoners of war. In the hands of the slave masters, they would definitely become slaves. Once they became slaves, it would be difficult to escape. The Wansure tribesmen, without totemic power, tried to escape from the flaming horns, but only a few succeeded. This was due to the difference in strength and speed. The slave masters could only snatch a few of them away. The smarter slave masters had already robbed the Wansure tribesmen of their treasures. The Wansure tribe was history now. The Wansure leader, Fu Wu, had committed suicide. After the fire seed was extinguished, he stabbed himself and died. The Wansure shaman fell in the fire pit. When Xiao Xian turned to leave, he spat out blood and died. Using the fire seed's power had used up too much of his energy. If the Wansure fire seed was still there, he might have had a chance to breathe. But now that it was extinguished, he was like a lamp without oil. There was no way to live. Ao and Zheng Luo quietly listened to the reports of the three team leaders who had just returned and thought to themselves, Today, the Wanshur fire seed was extinguished. Those who were lucky enough to escape from the Yinjiao would become wanderers or slaves. If it was a Yinjiao, how could Yinjiao become like Wanshur? Perhaps the disappearance of the primitive fire seed is a good thing. Ao sighed. This was the first time they had experienced a war like this. The first time they saw the destruction of a tribe's fire seed with their own eyes. The change in the primitive fire seed's form could prevent the fire seed from weakening. It could also prevent the possibility of being wiped out. The human race's situation was still developing in a good direction. Perhaps in the near future, all the tribes here would change. The primitive fire seed would become history, just like the other side of the sea. In the forest, the shaman and the others were still in a daze when they returned to the tribe. They still felt unreal. How long had it been? They were all prepared to sleep outside in the cave for a few days. But they had only gone yesterday, and now they were back. Was it over? Not only the Yinjiao tribesmen, but the wanderers living in Yinjiao were also shocked. How could the arrogant Wanshur tribe be gone? Many of them were still planning to run away if the situation went south, but they were told that the war was over. In a few days, they would be moving to Wanshur's former territory to build houses and reclaim land. The Flaming Horns planned to plant crops there, mourning the dead, comforting the wounded, taking over Wanshur's land, resettling the wanderers, planting the land outside the forest. Yinjiao was very busy. Yinjiao took over all of Wanshur's belongings. After robbing for so many years, they had stockpiled a lot of things. But now they were all Yinjiaos. Without the threat of Wanshur, they would naturally expand their territory. Although the forest was big, it wasn't suitable for large-scale farming and breeding. There were too many beasts, and they couldn't defend against all of them. Outside the forest, however, it was much more convenient. While Yinjiao was busy, the news of Wanshur's destruction spread to all the tribes. When the chief of the Mang tribe heard the news, his first reaction was disbelief. But he received news that the slave masters had been driven out of Wanshur's territory and went to other places. Some people went to Wanshur's territory and found that the people living there were all Yinjiao people. Everything he heard proved the credibility of the news. Really, Huang Yi still couldn't accept it. How long had it been? How long had it been since they came back from Yinjiao? Yinjiao said, "If you can do it, you can do it. If you can't, I'll do it." Did they really kill them? It was unbelievable. Losing the war was fine, but as long as their fire seed was not extinguished, they had a chance to turn things around. 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. As long as their fire seed was still there was hope. But there were many kinds of defeat. Wanshur was not only defeated, but their fire seed was also extinguished. It was the most complete kind of defeat. There was no chance for them to make a comeback. Thinking of this, the chief of the Mang tribe and the shaman both felt a chill in their hearts. Yinjiao really did it. How long did it take them to attack Wanshur? Why is there no news at all? Asked the chief of the Mang tribe. Since Yinjiao's fire seed became abnormal, they had sent people there. Once the war started, the people who were watching them would definitely send news. They should have a general understanding of the situation there. The person who reported the news said with a hoarse voice, Half a day, what? Not only the chief of the Mang tribe, but also the others present jumped up from their chairs and bamboo mats. Half a day. The chief of the Mang tribe wanted to dig his ears again to prevent himself from hallucinating. Yes, that's what the people watching him said. The person who reported the news nodded heavily. In half a day, the Wanshur tribe that had been thriving for hundreds of years, was gone. The chief of the Mang tribe was sweating. After thinking for a while, he said to Huang Yi, "Go to Yinjiao again and see if the news is true in Yinjiao." Huang Yi, who had just returned from Yinjiao, felt very conflicted. Should he go again? In addition to the Mang tribe, several other tribes, even those on the grassland, had received the news. Since Yinjiao's fire seed became abnormal, it attracted the attention of many people. Naturally, the news of Wanshur's destruction was also known through some channels. Therefore, when Huang Yi packed his things and went to the Yinjiao tribe again, he met Gu Ji and Xiao Gu, who were also conflicted. Thinking of the last time they brought people to the Yinjiao tribe, the three of them could only sigh. They were conflicted. Chapter 518. After the war ended unexpectedly, the Yinjiao tribe was busy every day. The fearsome beast forest was in the direction of the Wanshi tribe. People came and went every day, and the sound of trees being chopped or hammered could often be heard. Because the Yinjiao tribe wanted to take over the Wanshi tribe's territory, they planned to open up a path to transport supplies from the tribe in the forest to the Wanshi tribe. In the past, it wasn't difficult to walk in the forest, but it was more troublesome to open up a path. The dangerous plants and beasts in the forest were exterminated, and the trees were cut down according to the planned route. The cut-down trees were transported to the side to build houses for the people. The uneven places on the ground had to be smoothed out, otherwise it would not be good to pull the cart in the future. Therefore, when people walked past here, they often saw bare-chested Yinjiao warriors hammering the ground with large stone hammers. The ground shook with the thuds. Hurry up and pull out, or I won't be able to hammer it. A warrior with a large stone hammer yelled at his companion, wiping his sweat. In the place he pointed, there were trees that had been chopped down. The roots were still there. If they wanted to make the ground firm, they couldn't leave the wood behind. Wait, there's a big rock underground. I'll dig it out first, then you hammer it. Seeing this, the warrior who was hammering the ground put the stone hammer aside and sat on the grass to rest. He looked back at the result of his hard work over the past few days. A smooth dirt road stretched from the tribe's position to here. There was no longer the dangerous atmosphere of the forest. He couldn't help but feel proud. Thinking of something, he couldn't help but ask his companions, "Hey, I heard that the chief wants to trade for some cart-pulling beasts from the Lu tribe. Do you think horses or cows are better?" "Horses. Horses can pull carts, ride them, and run fast. Cows. What's so good about horses? Cows can pull carts and run fast. And I heard they can pull plows too. And cows have horns. They look more powerful. Cows and horses are the same, but the Lu tribe's bird eggs are better," a warrior said. "TSK, the eggs of the Lu tribe are bigger than the eggs of the other tribes. Let me tell you, when we were on the other side of the sea, our tribe raised ducks. They were brought back by Great Elder Xian. They also had duck eggs, which could detoxify poison. It's a pity that the duck didn't come with us." Speaking of the Great Elder, he came out of the same cave as me. Ku recalled a long time ago, before they came to the old haunt and awakened their totemic power. They lived in a cave at the foot of the mountain. Hearing Ku's words, the others stopped bragging and gathered around to look around. Seeing that no one else was near, they lowered their voices and asked Ku, "Hey, brother, tell us about the Great Elder back then. Was he very powerful?" Back then, Ku recalled the thin and small figure in his memory. No one would believe that the person back then had grown to such an extent. At this moment, the first elder that these people were talking about was frowning and biting the end of his pen. "How do I write it? How do you want me to write it?" Xian looked at the empty animal skin scroll. He had bites on the wooden handle of the brush, leaving bite marks on it. Xian didn't have this habit before, but these days he was forced to bite the pen because of the task assigned by the shaman. In half a day, the shaman destroyed the fire seed of the Wanshi tribe. This surprised and delighted the shaman. As the first large-scale victory in 1,000 years, it must be recorded and passed down to future generations. This was a shining point in Yinjiao's history. It couldn't be missed. And to record this significant historical event, how to extinguish the fire seed was a very important part. The shaman couldn't write this part, so Xian had to write it himself. But here came the problem. Xian couldn't write it. How to extinguish the fire seed was almost an instinctive reaction, like a dream. After the fire was extinguished, he recovered and rested, but the process of extinguishing the fire was a little vague. Now, no matter how hard Xian tried to recall, it was difficult for him to remember the key parts. First of all. Second, what Xian wrote down was to be passed down to future generations of Yinjiao. So he had to be careful. Words and sentences had to be carefully chosen. Otherwise, the future generations of Yinjiao would be affected. As the Great Elder, he had to have the momentum and dignity of the Great Elder. According to the habits of the ancestors, The animal skin scrolls that recorded important events were all written concisely and clearly, with the key points highlighted. They also had special idiomatic sentences. In their eyes, this was the most solemn way of writing, so Xiao Xian had to learn from them. However, Xiao Xian's habit of using words was obviously different from others. With a long sigh, Xiao Xian looked sideways at Gui Zhe on the other side of the table. As the successor of the shaman, Gui Zhe was also given a task and had to write a lot of things. Looking at the 3 animal skin scrolls next to him, Xiao Xian didn't even need a draft. Noticing Xiao Xian's gaze, Gui Zhe raised his head and looked at Xiao Xian in confusion. Cough. Gui Zhe, lend me your animal skin scrolls to copy for reference. Xiao Xian said. Gui Zhe didn't expect Xiao Xian to ask this question. Generally speaking, whether it was the shaman or the successor of the shaman, the animal skin scrolls they wrote couldn't be casually shown to others, because most of what they wrote contained some of the tribe's secrets. Even most of the people in the tribe didn't know about it. However, Xiao Xian, as the great elder of the tribe, was qualified to look at the animal skin scrolls. Moreover, it seemed that there was nothing he didn't know about what was written. Gui Zhe hesitated for a moment, then handed the 3 animal skin scrolls next to him to Xiao Xian. She didn't understand. It was just an animal skin scroll. Why did he have to be so hesitant? Xiao Xian used Gui Zhe's words as a reference and made a draft. He couldn't remember the specific situation when the fire seed was extinguished, so he could only leave the words "follow instinct" and "follow the instructions of the fire seed." This was the universal sentence on the animal skin scroll, so it couldn't be wrong. As for the specifics, he could only add them when he remembered. Coming out of the shaman's house, Xiao Xian looked at the sun in the sky. It should be sunny these days, which would be very convenient for the tribe to carry out their plans. In 2 days, the road from the tribe to the forest should be ready. When he returned home, Caesar was lying outside, grinding his teeth on a piece of animal bone. In the battle with the Wanshi tribe, Caesar lost an eye, but it had a strong recovery ability. As a branded ferocious beast, it also had the power of a Yinjiao's totem, but it couldn't merge with the fire seed. With the power of the totem, it could naturally recover faster. In the Battle of Wanshi, it killed the most Wanshi beasts in the tribe. Caesar was more seriously injured than the others, but in terms of recovery ability, it was better than the others. When Caesar was able to hunt in the forest, the 2 beasts in the Yang Guang's house were still resting. The forest Rakos was still lying on its back because of its foot injury. When they came back from the Wanshi tribe, it was Guang who carried it back. According to the tribe's secret engraving technique, the descendants of the ferocious beasts in the tribe would become ordinary beasts again. The influence of the engraving technique would only exist in their generation. In the future, the tribe would choose the best ones from their descendants to engrave. Because of Caesar's eye injury, Xiao Xian made an eye patch with animal skin to prevent the wound from rubbing dust and stones or getting infected by branches in the forest. At first, Caesar wasn't used to it and always wanted to scratch it with its claws. Now it was much better. Sometimes when it went out to hunt, it would rub off the eye patch. Olka would replace it with a spare one and make a few more. The wound was almost healed, but Caesar's right eye was gone and couldn't recover. In the future, Caesar could only see with one eye, which might affect its hunting. Recently, it spent more time hunting, so it was getting used to it. Old friend, it's okay if you can't catch any prey. I'll take care of you. Xiao Xian checked Caesar's recovery and made sure there was no more infection. Then he entered the house. Xian, the people of the Lu tribe came to see you, said old Ku, who was working on a stone tool. The Lu tribe? Yinjiao? Yes, that's him. When they heard the news of Wanshi's destruction, the people of the Lu tribe all cheered. That scourge was finally gone. Now, the people of the Lu tribe came to Yinjiao eagerly. The Wanshi tribe was leveled. Houses, animal pens, and fields were rebuilt on the ground. The people of the Lu tribe also gave free guidance to the people who built the animal pens. They taught them how to make the construction more convenient, and the animals they raised would be better. Xiao Xian guessed that Yinjiao wanted to discuss with him about raising young beasts. Now that the tribe's territory had expanded, new animal pens were built one by one. Naturally, there was more demand. A few days ago, when the people of the Lu tribe came, they mentioned that Yin Jiao was very willing to make a deal with Yin Jiao. Destroying the Wanshi tribe in half a day was indeed a shocking thing. The name of the Flaming Horn tribe had also spread out. The major tribes in the central region would definitely be more vigilant now. However, they didn't dare to offend the Flaming Horn tribe. Otherwise, they wouldn't have tolerated the Wanshi tribe for hundreds of years without fighting. If they thought too much, they would think too much and worry too much, which would only make them hesitant. He just didn't know how many tribes would send people over this time. Xiao Xian looked around, but didn't see Yin Jiao. He heard that Yin Jiao went outside the forest to guide the construction of animal pens. He would probably come back later. Xiao Xian wasn't in a hurry. He turned around and went to the Wanderers area. The Wanderers had been living on the edge of the forest for 2 years. After all, they weren't Yin Jiao people and didn't have much power. They were still afraid of this forest. Even if there were Yin Jiao warriors patrolling, compared to the outside of the forest, they preferred the latter. So this time, when Yin Jiao was expanding their territory, they were anxious to move there. When he arrived at the Wanderers area, the people here were also busy. Some Wanderers went out to build houses. They still had to build their own houses, but they had to follow Yin Jiao's rules and couldn't build randomly. Most of the people who were still here were injured or young children. There were children running outside. Only in Yin Jiao's Wanderers area could they have such a chance. If they were in the Wanderers area near other tribes, the young children wouldn't even dare to go out of their houses. Knowing that the Wanderers area was busy these days, the chief also sent people to keep an eye on them to prevent trouble. When Xiao Xian arrived, a group of Yin Jiao warriors were talking and laughing together. Chapter 519. As soon as they saw Xiao Xian, the group of people who were chatting and laughing immediately stood up straight. Although Xiao Xian was about the same age as them, and even younger than many of them, everyone in the Yin Jiao tribe was in awe of this great elder. Especially after the Battle of Wanshi, Xiao Xian's status was almost higher than the two chiefs. The group of people who were guarding here was to prevent the Wanderers from causing trouble. If they found any trouble, they would stop them. If not, they would just chat on the side. They didn't expect to meet Xiao Xian here. At this time, the mood of this group of people was like a student who was absent-minded in class and suddenly found the principal standing behind him. Maybe the people who were guarding here weren't asked to do anything, but they were really relaxed at this moment. So, when they saw Xiao Xian, they looked away guiltily and then quickly glanced at Xiao Xian from time to see if the great elder was angry. Originally, Xiao Xian planned to pass by here to check on the farmlands and animal pens in the tribe. But when he passed by, he stopped and walked towards the Wanderers area. Here he comes. Here he comes. The warriors who were guarding here felt nervous and looked down. When they looked up, they quickly looked at each other. The great elder's expression didn't look good. What should they do? Would they be scolded? Hearing Xiao Xian's footsteps approaching, their hearts beat fast. When Xiao Xian finally stopped in front of them, they had to look up and smile. Great elder. You've been guarding here all this time? Xiao Xian asked. Yes, we've been here all this time. We've been guarding here since dawn this morning. Nothing happened in the Wanderers area, the leader replied. What about before? Was it also you? Xiao Xian asked again. Yes, we and another group took turns guarding here. But we weren't here at night. There were other patrols. The leader said. He was secretly anxious. Did the great elder find something wrong? However, they had been guarding this place the entire time and hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary. Xiao Xian didn't ask any more questions. Instead, he walked toward the house not far away. The team members who stayed behind looked at each other. Then, the leader made the decision to follow Xiao Xian. If Xiao Xian noticed anything unusual, they could make up for it. Xiao Xian walked towards a very ordinary wooden house. Looking at its appearance and materials, it was indeed a very ordinary house in the Wanderers area. However, this house was quite far away from the other houses. In this area, there was only this house, as if it was isolated. There was a layer of dust on the stone at the entrance, and where the stone was sunken, the dirt had formed a clump on the stone. It was obvious that no one had sat on it for a long time. This house was the place where Xiao Xian had found the longevity leaf that recorded the knot divination technique. Since then, no one had come to this house. When the outsiders were discovered, the Wanderers were told that there were defectors. The other people who lived in the Wanderers area were anxious to separate from this house. They were afraid of being misunderstood. They were afraid of being suspected of being involved with the defectors and being driven out. Because Xiao Xian had told the patrols to pay attention to the surroundings, there were often some patrolling soldiers walking around. Now, the Wanderers who lived in the surrounding area had moved away as if they were avoiding the plague. Therefore, this isolated situation appeared. Xiao Xian didn't go in immediately. He walked around the outside of the house and then stopped at the window. There were some subtle scratches on the window frame. If one didn't pay attention, it would be difficult to notice. The scratches looked relatively fresh, and it didn't look like they had been there for a year or two. Although there was a layer of dust on the window frame, if one looked carefully, they would find that the dust there was thinner than other places, as if someone had gently blown it. "Has anyone gone in here recently?" Xiao Xian asked. "No. At least when we were here, we didn't see anyone go in," the leader hurriedly said. Because they knew that this place was the focus of attention, if they were guarding here, they would definitely pay more attention. They wouldn't go in easily, and they wouldn't make this kind of mistake. "Why don't I ask the people from the other team?" the leader asked. "Not now." Xiao Xian opened the door and walked into the house, but the following team didn't dare to go in easily. They knew that something must have happened in this house, and they wouldn't step in without permission. The situation in the house was similar to Xiao Xian's impression. The wooden table that was broken by Gigu in anger had already been cleaned up. The wooden house of about 20 square meters was empty. However, at the place where Xiao Xian dug out the longevity leaf, there were traces that the soil had been moved. Although the other party was very careful, it was still moved. There was a difference in the color of the soil. If it had been a while, it might not be obvious, but now, the traces were still relatively fresh. Someone should have been here within the past 3 days. "Someone has been here," Xiao Xian said as he suddenly looked in a direction and quickly walked out of the house. Seeing Xiao Xian's expression, the team guarding the Wanderer area knew that things had changed. They were about to follow, but Xiao Xian stopped again. They ran fast. Xiao Xian stared in a direction. He had just sensed an aura that didn't belong to the Yinjiao tribesmen. Since the Battle of Wanshi, his perception of the fire seed had become sharper. In addition, the other party should have been moving. If that person had been approaching here, Xiao Xian would have sensed it. However, the other party was too cautious. He seemed to have noticed Xiao Xian's gaze and decisively left quickly. Hearing Xiao Xian's words, the faces of the guards changed. "Grand Elder, you mean there's an outsider?" This outsider was naturally not a wanderer, but someone from another tribe who had snuck in. "Yes, you guys should pay more attention these few days. Try to use the power of the fire seed to sense the intruder," Xiao Xian said. The fire seed had already merged with everyone's body. If they used the power of the fire seed to sense the intruder, even if they couldn't immediately detect it, they would at least be able to sense it when the intruder was right in front of them. The benefit of merging with the fire seed was that the fire seed's sensing ability was strengthened. If the Yinjiao tribesmen only had a vague sense of their tribe's bloodline in the past, now it was very clear. This was also the difference between the Yinjiao tribesmen and the other tribes. Outsiders didn't know this. Yes, the guards hurriedly promised. They didn't doubt Xiao Xian's words. If the Grand Elder said it was true, then it must be true. An outsider sneaking in was no joke. They couldn't afford to let their guard down. At the same time, they were annoyed that an outsider had appeared in the area they were guarding. Although it wasn't considered a dereliction of duty, they didn't realize that this threat was real. Xiao Xian asked them to inform the other patrolling guards to tighten the security. Then, he walked around the Wanderer area and didn't find anything, so he went to the tribe's fields. Not long after, Duo Kong and the other 2 team leaders came looking for him. When the patrolling guards in the tribe were informed that an outsider had sneaked in, they naturally knew about it. Who could it be? The few large tribes that haven't made any moves? Duo Kong asked. No, Gigu's face darkened. It could also be a bandit. He had already heard from the others that Xiao Xian had gone to that house. He knew what Xiao Xian was suspecting. What made him angry was that they still hadn't caught the intruder. Now, the intruder might have appeared again. I don't know if the intruder this time is from the same group as the two from before. Although the two of them had snuck in, they didn't have any killing intent. But if it was someone else this time, I can't be sure what they would do. Xiao Xian was also on guard. Also, the intruder is very cautious and escapes quickly. It'll be hard to catch him. No matter what, strengthen the patrolling guards. To guard against a bandit, we can't just look at their appearance. They have too many tricks up their sleeves. We might not be able to recognize them just by looking at their appearance. We can only identify them from their roots. Strengthen the patrolling in the Wanderer district. Xiao Xian voiced his guess. They can't be hiding in the houses of other warriors in the tribe. Otherwise, they would have been discovered long ago. They can only be hiding in the Wanderer district or outside the tribe. The three team leaders nodded. Identification at the level of the fire seed was the most accurate. The infiltration of an outsider made the Yinjiao warriors, who had become complacent after destroying the Wanshi tribe, finally calm down. It was just the Wanshi tribe. In this world, there were many people stronger and more difficult to deal with than the Wanshi tribe. The bandits were one of them. As an alternative group, the robbers were indeed mysterious and gave people headaches. Even the Mang tribe and the Eight Limbs tribe had been infiltrated by the robbers, and more than once. Until now, they had not been caught. One could imagine how cunning they were. Moreover, Xiao Xian wanted to find the person who had snuck into Yinjiao and hid the longevity leaf in the house. He wanted to ask them where they found the longevity leaf. The knot divination recorded on the longevity leaf was passed down from the Yi tribe. Xiao Xian had confirmed this on the other side of the sea. It was also certain that the Yi tribe had brought the longevity leaf here 1,000 years ago. Then, from whom did the bandits steal the longevity leaf? Chapter 520. Because of the infiltrators, Yinjiao became nervous again. They were not as excited as they were after the Battle of Wanshi. They were famous for destroying Wanshi, but they also attracted a lot of attention. They could not afford to let their guard down. The road is done. Someone pulled the cart over today. It looks good. We built 10 animal pens outside. Do we need to build more? The fields have been demarcated. We'll distribute some to the wanderers according to the original plan. The rest is ours. In one of the stone houses in the Flaming Horn tribe, the 2 shamans, 2 chiefs, 3 team leaders, and many other team leaders were gathered for a discussion. They were discussing their recent progress. Of course, Grand Elder Xiao Xian could not be absent. As they talked, Ao noticed that Xiao Xian was distracted. He coughed. Xian, what do you think of what we talked about just now? Let's continue with the original plan. Although we can't plant much this year, we still need to do some work to make the land fatter. I've already told them what to do. I'll go check it out in 2 days. There's no need to expand the animal pens. Let's wait for the Lu tribe to send their cubs over. We'll take it one step at a time. If we raise too many suddenly, we might not be able to handle it, Xiao Xian said. Xiao Xian seemed to be distracted. He didn't expect him to listen to so much. Ao nodded. Then we'll do as you say. As for the metal wares, I've discussed it with Zheng Luo. When all the wanderers move away, we'll build a bigger casting room. Xiao Xian had no objections. After knowing the secret of the core seed, the tribesmen were very concerned about smelting and casting. Maybe it was because they heard about the slave masters on the other side of the sea, or maybe it was because they saw the potential of metal wares. They spent a lot of effort on this. By the way, during this time, other than the Lu tribe, did any other tribes come? Xiao Xian asked. Never heard of them. I don't think so. Nope, the others replied. But there are suspicious people walking around. Maybe they're from the big tribes in the central region. Duo Kong saw it when he went outside to supervise the work today, but the other party was far away. When he moved, the other party ran away. What? Are you waiting for them to come? Asked Zheng Luo. Xiao Xian shook his head. I just think that at this time, they should have come here to investigate. However, since they haven't appeared yet, perhaps they have other plans, or perhaps they are waiting. Wait for what? Ao asked. Maybe he wants to wait for more people to come together, Xiao Xian speculated. The people in the room looked at each other and smiled. Being able to make those tribes fear them proved that Yin Jiao's position in those people's hearts had indeed risen. This made them very proud, but when they thought of the possible predicament they might face, they immediately calmed down. In any case, no matter how big the challenge was, they would face it head-on. If the people from the Hui tribe come, let me know. Xiao Xian said. Okay, if I see anyone from the Hui tribe, I'll send someone to find you. Ao knew why Xiao Xian called the people from the Hui tribe back, so he immediately agreed. 2 days later, as Xiao Xian had guessed, people from several tribes came together. The leaders of the Mang tribe, Eight Limbs tribe, and Feather tribe were the same 3 people as last time. However, this time, the Thousand Mast tribe, Tian Shan tribe, and Longbow tribe were with them. The Hui tribe did not come with them. They arrived 1 step behind, but not far from each other. In a place like this where information did not travel quickly, they must have some special means of communication to be able to gather together. When the 7 tribes arrived, Xiao Xian was in the forging room with a few blacksmiths, thinking about how to improve the bronze wares. Although they knew some theoretical methods, there were always some mistakes in the implementation. There were not many weapons that were up to standard, let alone good or even high-quality ones. They did not even see a shadow of those. They're already here. Xiao Xian put down the bronze axe in his hand and went out with the warrior who came to inform him. Yes, the shaman and the chief are with him now, but the shaman said you're busy, so you don't have to go if you don't want to. The warrior who brought the message briefly explained to Xiao Xian. How many people from the Hui tribe came? How did they come? Xiao Xian asked. The warrior thought for a moment and said, about 10. They should have flown here on eagles. I saw 3 giant eagles. They were big enough. One of them was even bigger than a cha-cha. Who's the leader? A man called He-Shi. He-Shi, Xiao Xian remembered. When they went to the desert, He-Shi was with the Hui tribe. As an elder, He-Shi helped Xiao Xian several times during the desert trip. It was better than the other tribes who ignored him. After getting a general idea, Xiao Xian knew what was going on. The other tribes felt that they did not have a good relationship with Yin Jiao before. This time, they came together with confidence. However, this time, they seemed to have lowered their stance. It might not be because of Yin Jiao's destruction of Wanshi. Perhaps their ultimate goal was still the fire seed. This was the key reason why they were forced to lower their stance. In comparison, the relationship between the Hui tribe and Yin Jiao was not so bad, so they did not feel much psychological pressure. Xiao Xian waited for the other side to finish talking before he went over. The people from the 7 tribes were arranged to stay in some newly built houses outside the forest. They were not allowed to get close to the other tribes in the forest. Xiao Xian asked someone to take him to the resting place of the Hui tribe. When he arrived, he saw a giant eagle pecking its feathers outside the house. Looking at its size, it was indeed bigger than Cha-Cha. However, Xiao Xian felt that this eagle was somewhat familiar. When Xiao Xian looked over, the eagle also sensed it. It turned its head to look at Xiao Xian. Obviously, it still remembered Xiao Xian. Its first reaction was to bristle. Its neck became thicker because of the bristling feathers. It even screamed at Xiao Xian. "Oh, it's you, loser," Xiao Xian said lightly. This sentence made the eagle even angrier. Its eyes flashed sharply. Standing on the ground, its claws scratched the hard ground like it was tofu, leaving a few deep marks. What's the rush? The truth is the truth, right? Shandao. Xiao Xian continued. This eagle was the one he had met when he went to the grassland to pick up wanderers. He had fought with the traveling team of the Dishan tribe at a trading rest place. At that time, this eagle had been badly beaten by Cha-Cha. Therefore, Xiao Xian was right to call it a loser. At that time, this eagle was not so big. It was about the same size as Cha-Cha. Now it had changed so much. This was not the result of natural growth. It must have gone to the Eagle Mountain, so it changed. The people of the Hui tribe in the house heard the cry and quickly came out. Some of them knew Xiao Xian, such as the one who fed Shandao. It's Xiao Xian, the great elder, Gula said with a smile. Today he asked the other Yin Jiao people about Xiao Xian. Only then did he know that Xiao Xian had become the great elder of the whole Yinjiao tribe. Moreover, judging from the expressions of the Yinjiao warriors when they talked about Xiao Xian, it was definitely not because of connections. Oh, it's Gula. Xiao Xian also recognized the leader of the Hui tribe's trading team. Great Elder Xiao Xian, what brings you here at this time? Gula was very happy to see Xiao Xian. It was rare to see someone he knew, so he wanted to talk with him. He also wanted to know more, but he began to feel uneasy when he thought of something. I heard that Cha-Cha went to the Hui tribe 2 years ago and left with several eagles of your tribe. Is that true? Xiao Xian asked directly. It really came. Gu La's eyes flashed with worry. He nodded and said, yes, they went to Eagle Mountain together. Some of the giant mountain eagles living in our tribe's territory are about to go to Eagle Mountain, but seeing Xiao Xian staring at him and waiting for him to continue, Gula paused and continued. The one from your tribe went in and didn't come out. It went into Eagle Mountain and didn't come out? Xiao Xian asked. Gula nodded. That's what Shan Dao and the others told us. According to the rules of the giant mountain eagles, only those who came out after entering Eagle Mountain would be considered successful. If they failed, they would die. Xiao Xian had heard this before. Everyone in the Hui tribe knew this, so they didn't dare to say it out loud. Other than Cha-Cha, the rest of the eagles that went to Eagle Mountain returned. How could the Yinjiao people not have any ideas? Xiao Xian was silent for a while. He asked Shan Dao a few questions and asked Gula to translate. He could understand Cha-Cha's actions and cries, but he didn't know what the eagle was trying to say. Xiao Xian wanted to ask about the details of their trip to Eagle Mountain, but this seemed to touch on the eagle's secret. Shan Dao avoided talking about it, and even Gula didn't know. So, as long as it was about how to get to Eagle Mountain, or what happened on the way, the eagle wouldn't tell them. Since he couldn't get an answer, Xiao Xian could only change the question. When Cha-Cha arrived at Eagle Mountain, how was he? Xiao Xian asked. Very good, Gula replied. So good that he could throw stones at other eagles. Was he injured? Injured, but not seriously. The others were all injured. Did he rush into Eagle Mountain by himself? Yes. After asking some questions, Xiao Xian didn't understand. How long had it been since the last time he went to Eagle Mountain? Why would he go there again? Some adult eagles might not go there again for 20 or 30 years. Even if he went there frequently, it might not be effective. Plus, he would have to take greater risks. What was Cha-Cha trying to do? Did he want to kill himself in Eagle Mountain? That couldn't be. That guy wasn't a suicidal eagle. Xiao Xian couldn't figure out why Cha-Cha would go to Eagle Mountain. He couldn't go there directly to find him. He only knew the road that led to Eagle Mountain. After coming here, he didn't know which other road led to Eagle Mountain. After thanking Gula, Xiao Xian didn't stay any longer. He thought about it as he walked towards the newly cultivated fields. As he walked, Xiao Xian stopped in his tracks. He felt two familiar auras. They were not from the Flaming Horns, nor were they from any of the tribes that came here. Chapter 5:21. When Xiao Xian came here to find the tribesmen, people from other tribes were watching this place. The place where they were settled was not far away, so if there was any movement, the others would know. When Xiao Xian came here, people from other tribes naturally saw him too. Seeing Xiao Xian suddenly turn and walk in that direction, people's eyes suddenly became meaningful. The Eight Limbs tribe was so scheming. Young people at this age definitely had little resistance to beautiful girls. The Grand Elder of the Flaming Horn tribe would not be spared either. In that direction was the house where the Eight Limbs tribe was settled. Outside the house, Sue of the Eight Limbs tribe was sitting on a white-haired spider, combing the spider's hair with a fishbone comb in her hand. Sue was one of the more powerful people in the Eight Limbs tribe. Not to mention the Eight Limbs tribe, there were also many young people from other tribes who were pursuing her. Xiaogu, who led the team from the Eight Limbs tribe this time, was also happy to see this situation. He thought to himself, good, if that guy is interested in Sue, maybe we can learn more about Yinjiao's secrets through him. How could he have overlooked this? Seeing Xiao Xian come over, Sue's hand movements paused, her fingers holding the fishbone comb tightened, and her lowered eyes slowly looked up. Before she could say anything, Xiao Xian ran past her like a gust of wind. Sue. She carelessly combed a large tuft of white hair from the spider's body. The people who had been watching the situation here were also confused. What happened to the head elder of Yinjiao tribe? Xiao Xian didn't pay attention to what others were thinking at all. He just locked on the two breaths. Different from the breaths he encountered a few days ago, these two people should be the ones who had sneaked into the tribe and buried the longevity leaf. It was rare to find these two people, so Xiao Xian definitely wouldn't let go of this opportunity. Maybe they felt Xiao Xian's approach. The two people planned to run away quickly. One escape. Xiao Xian's knees slightly bent, like a taut bowstring trembling slightly. He sped up again and ran away with a whoosh, leaving only a faint shadow for the people behind. The people of the 7 tribes looked at Xiao Xian's sudden crazy behavior in confusion. What's wrong with him? Someone asked. Who knows? Maybe he's in a hurry to eat meat. I heard that Yinjiao people love meat. They love meat, but they don't lack it. Anyway, Yinjiao is a big tribe now. Even if they are in a hurry to eat meat, they shouldn't be in such a hurry. Who knows? After all, Yinjiao's was rude and rude and rude. They had never been able to tear their images, names as his impression. From the Yinjiao people, ISSS to follow him. S. Someone sighed with emotions. S. They were just discussing whether they could follow a person with a slightly higher status in the Flaming Horns tribe. Maybe they could find out some secrets. But after seeing the scene in front of them, they were deeply suspicious. Although they didn't understand why Xiao Xian was doing this, they couldn't help but be curious. Xiao Xian was running in the direction of the Yinjiao tribe, and it looked more like he was chasing after someone. The people who had been hiding in their houses to discuss countermeasures all ran out. Because this was still Yinjiao territory, they couldn't move freely. They could only jump onto the roof to see further. There's someone running in front. Someone on the roof exclaimed. In front of Xiao Xian, there were 2 figures running so fast that they couldn't see their faces clearly. It seemed that Xiao Xian's target was those 2. Yinjiao's patrol team is following him. Something must have happened. Besides us, who else has snuck in? Without much hesitation, the Feather, Tian Shan, and Hui tribesmen hurriedly called out to their own tribe's birds. Of course, the roof couldn't be compared to the sky. Moreover, they couldn't run around on land. So how could the Yinjiao control in the air? Yinjiao only had one bird now, and the more threatening eagle was long gone. They had nothing to fear now. Let me up. Someone from the Longboat tribe ran towards the Feather tribe, but was kicked away by the Feather tribesmen. Get lost. Go find the Tian Shan and Hui tribes. Their eagles are bigger. The Feather tribe's birds were mostly small, so they could only carry a limited number of people. In terms of air power, the 2 tribes on the grasslands had the advantage. Unfortunately, they wouldn't let anyone from other tribes stand on their backs. Several birds took off almost at the same time, chasing after Xiao Xian. When Xiao Xian chased after the 2 figures, the Yinjiao patrol team naturally noticed something was wrong. Moreover, the 2 people who snuck in hid well and were far away from the Yinjiao warriors, so the patrol team didn't notice them. But once they started running, their totemic power soared, and the fire seed's aura became stronger. They obviously weren't from their own tribe, nor were they from the 7 tribes that came today. They must be the targets they were guarding against these days. Chase! The patrol team held their breath and ran after them. However, not everyone had Xiao Xian's speed. The patrol team had only just reached the edge of the tribe, but they were already far behind the 3 people in front of them, and the distance was still increasing. Even if they were left far behind, they had to keep following. Maybe they could help when the time came. Moreover, the tribe rewarded rewards based on merit. How could they give up such a good opportunity to earn merit? In the patrol team, a few Yinjiao warriors who weren't good at speed stopped. They couldn't keep up with the rest of the team, and if they stayed, they would only be a burden. They could only turn around to inform the leaders of the tribe, and at the same time, guard against other people who might have snuck in. On the ground, Xiao Xian locked onto the 2 people and kept chasing after them. His legs were so fast that they couldn't be seen. His whole body left a faint, fleeting shadow on the grassland. Run? You can run once, but I won't let you run a second time. If I don't catch you today, I'm not the Great Elder. Xiao Xian sped up again, and the air whizzed past, leaving a whistling sound. His two arms kept swinging and cutting the air, making whooshing sounds. At this time, Xiao Xian was like a speeding train, whizzing past on the ground. The patrol team behind could no longer see their great elder's figure. They could only vaguely judge the direction from the fire seed's aura. "Keep chasing." The leader of the patrol team gritted his teeth and said. They had already chased so far away from the tribe, it wasn't good to turn back. The people of the Feather Tribe, Tian Shan Tribe, and Hui Tribe in the air were also dumbfounded. They knew that Xiao Xian ran fast, but they didn't expect him to be this fast. They almost couldn't keep up. Not to mention the Yinjiao patrol team and the people in the air. Even the two people running at the front were very surprised, and their mouths were bitter. How did this kid catch up to them? He didn't chase this fast before. No, that kid didn't have this kind of speed before. The people in the air, as well as the Yinjiao patrol team, were all ignored by these two people. The only thing they were afraid of was Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian's pursuit exceeded their expectations, and they had no choice but to take measures. Fortunately, Xiao Xian was only one person, and there were two of them. Needless to say, the two suddenly split up and ran in two different directions. As long as Xiao Xian paused and hesitated for a second or two, they would be able to leave Xiao Xian further behind. That would be half the battle won. However, they didn't expect that Xiao Xian didn't stop at all. He didn't even slow down. He continued to chase after one of the figures and didn't care about the other one. Damn it, why didn't that kid even stop? The person being stared at by Xiao Xian cursed in his heart. Unfortunately, this wasn't the time to be distracted. After chasing for so long, that kid showed no signs of slowing down. They didn't have the advantage in speed, and they might not win in terms of physical strength. They had to use other methods. The person running at the front quickly observed the terrain. They were already quite a distance away from the Yinjiao tribe, and far away from the territory once occupied by Wanshi. There were more trees around, and further ahead, there was a dense forest. Good. The person running at the front was secretly happy. He was also very good at hiding in the forest. Let's see if that kid can still find us after we hide in the forest. Xiao Xian also thought to himself, "You think I can't find you if you hide in the forest?" Chapter 522. Although the forest ahead was quite dense, it was still very different from the fearsome beast forest. There were many trees in the forest, but they weren't very big. There were very few ancient trees that were hundreds of years old. This place was deserted, but it didn't mean that no one came here. Sometimes, some teams that were on a trade trip would enter this forest. There were no fearsome beasts, only some small animals that were active. After the person in front rushed into the forest, he began to quickly look for the best hiding spot. His running route was also strange and varied, twisting and turning in the forest. His line of sight was blocked by the leaves, so he couldn't see the person in front. Xiao Xian could only hear the rustling of leaves and branches. Seeing the other person's movements in the forest, Xiao Xian knew that he was an experienced person who knew how to run quickly in the forest with the least noise. Some of the sounds in front might not have been accidentally made by the other person. It was very likely that they had deliberately made it. He couldn't judge by the sound alone. Those were all interference methods used by the other person. Xiao Xian kept a close eye on the other person's fire seed. However, as he chased, the other person's fire seed suddenly disappeared. Strange. Xiao Xian slowed down his footsteps, then slowly moved forward. There were a few small animals hugging branches in the surrounding trees, looking curiously at Xiao Xian. They made a threatening sound, but Xiao Xian ignored it. There was a slope in front of him. Because of the dense weeds, Xiao Xian couldn't see the situation below the slope. He could only judge from the sound of running water that there was a small river below. In the middle of the slope, there was an animal skin coat that the other person had worn. Further down the slope, there were also the pants and shoes that the target had worn. Xiao Xian didn't go down to check. Instead, he stood at the top of the slope and looked around. There were a few thicker trees around. Perhaps because there weren't many people here, the trees were older than the trees in other places. The shrubbery wasn't very tall, so Xiao Xian could see the general situation of the surrounding ground. After scanning the bushes, Xiao Xian walked around the surrounding ancient trees. From time to time, he would look at the branches on the trees. Occasionally, he would stop and listen to the surrounding sounds to see if anyone was approaching. For a moment, the only sound that could be heard was Xiao Xian's footsteps on the ground and the rustling of branches. Not far away, a few birds were chirping, which made this place seem even more desolate. Xiao Xian walked back and forth a few times to check the surroundings before leaving. After Xiao Xian left, the surroundings became quiet again, with only the faint chirping of birds and insects. After a while, there was a slight movement on the tree near the slope, as if someone was gently scraping the bark of the tree. About 20 meters above the ground, at the intersection of two branches on the tree trunk, a pair of eyes suddenly opened, and the eyeballs even moved a bit. At first glance, one would think that the eyes grew on the tree. However, upon closer inspection, one would realize that the eyes weren't embedded in the tree, but belonged to someone else. The texture and wrinkles on the tree bark gradually receded, revealing human skin. With the sound of light breathing, a humanoid figure was revealed. This person was the target that Xiao Xian had been chasing. After looking around, the person nimbly slid down the tree and prepared to leave. However, after taking 2 steps, his scalp suddenly tightened. His sharp intuition told him that there was danger here. His eyelids twitched, and he suddenly had a bad feeling. Run! He stepped out and prepared to start his second round of running. However, before he could start running, his legs seemed to touch something. With a buzzing sound, the branches on the surrounding trees seemed to be suddenly cut off. The broken branches and leaves flew up, and the easily overlooked thin threads gathered in his direction. His leg was tightly bound. His ankle had been tied twice, and it was very tight, as if it was going to break his entire leg. He could feel that if he tried to break free, his leg might be crippled. He wanted to take out a knife to cut the thread, but he didn't have the time. Just as he was about to take out his knife, a few more threads tightened around his leg, and his entire leg was bound. Not far away, footsteps could be heard approaching at a steady pace. Hearing the footsteps, the person who was bound by the noose bowed his head, resigned to his fate. How'd he fall for it? This kid is really cunning. Well, I won't run. The person raised his hand and looked at Xiao Xian, who was walking in front of him, and forced a smile. Xiao Xian returned a smile. His wrist moved, and the blade of his sword was next to the person's neck. If he moved a little more, he could cut the person's pulse. The coldness and murderous intent of the metal blade made the person tremble. Don't kill me. I really don't mean any harm. I'm just curious. I heard that you destroyed the Wanshe tribe, so I went to Yinjiao to have a look. Xiao Xian didn't talk nonsense with him. His sword didn't move at all, and he said, "Come out." The person raised his eyebrows slightly, but didn't speak. The surrounding forest was very quiet. There were no human voices, only the sounds of insects and birds in the forest. You don't want to come out? Then I'll collect his corpse. Xiao Xian was about to cut down. Wait! A woman's voice, of unknown age, came from behind the bushes. She looked very young, but gave Xiao Xian a sense of weather-beaten maturity. Her face was very ordinary, the kind that was easy to forget. She was dressed like a Yinjiao tribesman. The patterns on her animal skin clothes were all Yinjiao-style flame patterns, and the bone ornaments she wore were similar to those of the Yinjiao tribesmen. If you only looked at her appearance, she wouldn't stand out at all among the Yinjiao tribesmen. No wonder this person could sneak into the territory of the Yinjiao tribe. If there's something we can talk about, there's no need to kill. The woman was still calm. You haven't killed him yet, so I guess you won't learn more from us. That's right. Xiao Xian withdrew his sword, but he didn't retract the worm's silk that bound the person. The woman glanced at the person who was tied up and saw him shake his head. She knew that the thread that bound him wasn't ordinary and couldn't be easily broken. She had to think of another way. Xiao Xian pretended that he didn't see the exchange of glances between the two. He asked, "Who are you? Why did you come to the Yinjiao tribe? Don't tell me you sneaked in because you were curious. I don't believe that. If you continue to talk nonsense, I'll break your leg." Although Xiao Xian's tone was calm, the two of them knew that he wasn't joking. The sword that was placed on the person's neck just now was very real. If the woman didn't come out, the sword would have cut him down. Knowing that it wasn't easy to fool him, the person who was tied up thought for a while and said, "Robber 11, Robber 12. The woman who walked over said, unwillingly. Seeing Xiao Xian frown and stare at them, Robber 11 said helplessly, "It's true, I'm not lying. I'm sure you've guessed that we're from the robber tribe. We're named according to our ranking." This was half true and half false. They were indeed named according to their ranking, but it was just a code name. They wouldn't say their real names so easily. Even the inner circle of the robber tribe didn't know what everyone was called. However, they wouldn't tell Xiao Xian about this. Xiao Xian didn't say anything. He just stared at the two of them and sized them up. The two of them felt a chill down their spines. Xiao Xian didn't suspect the origins of these two people. Although he looked calm on the surface, he was very surprised in his heart. He discovered something strange. In the past, he only felt that the fire seed of the robber tribe was special. Now, it seemed that the feeling wasn't wrong. The robber tribe was indeed different from the other tribes. Xiao Xian already knew that the robber tribe was a very special one. The members of this tribe were relatively independent and didn't live together like the other tribes. The mystery of this tribe was that until now, no one had been able to find out where this tribe was located. Many people hated them to the core and spent a lot of effort to find them. There were even many people who lost their precious items and shouted that they wanted to destroy the fire seed of the robber tribe so that the robber tribe had nowhere to steal. However, no one had ever succeeded. Of course, they couldn't succeed because the original fire seed of the robber tribe was probably long gone. Xiao Xian had always thought that Yinjiao was the first tribe to merge their fire seed. But now, it seemed that this wasn't the case. No wonder when he asked about the robber tribe in the past, everyone said that they were very mysterious. Their members were scattered and hard to understand. It was because they merged their fire seed that they didn't need to gather around the original fire seed. Their tribe structure had changed a long time ago. They went from gathering to being scattered, more like an organization. They did their own things on normal days and gathered together when something happened. It was no wonder that no one could find the main camp of the robber tribe. They didn't even have the original fire seed. Even if there was a fire pit, it was useless. "What did you steal in Yinjiao?" Xiao Xian asked. "Nothing. We didn't even do anything, and we were already discovered." Robber 11 shook his head. What he said was true. They were also depressed. How did they get discovered so quickly? Other than you two, who else snuck into Yinjiao? Xiao Xian asked again. "I don't know," Robber 11 said. "We don't know what the others were doing. They were all doing their own things." "You really don't know?" "He went to the house where you buried the thing," Xiao Xian said. Robber 11 and Robber 12's expressions changed. How did Xiao Xian know that they buried the thing? Could it be that the thing had already been dug out by the people from Yinjiao? It was Robber 7. The two didn't intend to hide it. They didn't think there was anything to hide. They only told Robber 7 where they buried the thing. If someone went there, it was most likely Robber 7. 7? Xiao Xian looked up at the two in front of him. He was ranked in front of these two, which meant that his level was higher than theirs. No wonder he ran away so quickly. His reaction was faster than these two. "Where did you steal the thing you buried?" Xiao Xian asked. The two didn't say anything. They exchanged glances many times, probably thinking about how to deceive him. "If you answer honestly, I can let you go." "Really?" The two looked straight at Xiao Xian, trying to discern the truth from Xiao Xian's eyes. "Really?" Chapter 523. In the forest, Xiao Xian followed the footsteps of the two in front of him. According to Robber 11 and Robber 12, the treasure was found in an underground cave not far from the Yinjiao tribe. At that time, the two of them started from the drumming tribe and followed the Yinjiao team to the old haunt. They planned to get something from the Yinjiao team. Because they stole the Water Moon King Stone from the Yinjiao tribe and other tribes, they had a lot of loot that affected their movements. They wanted to hide the loot first before continuing to follow the Yinjiao team. Just like before, they would find an inconspicuous place to hide the loot. When they were done, they would go back to dig up the loot and escape with it. It was at that time that they found an underground cave. Many tribes would find a place to dig underground caves. Some did it to hide food, some did it to prevent danger and build a place to hide. The place where the cave was located was probably where a small tribe used to live. But after the tribe moved or was destroyed, the cave was left behind. The cave was well hidden and uninhabited. It was surrounded by dense trees and bushes. If they didn't deliberately dig around to hide the treasure, they might not have found the cave. Now, that Xiao Xian wanted to know the location and promised to let them go as long as they led the way, Robber 11 and Robber 12 agreed. Robber 11 and Robber 12 had never been caught before. Even if they were discovered, they could escape quickly and hard to catch up with. This was their first time being caught. They could either be killed or lead the way. They could only choose the latter. The two of them were husband and wife. If one was caught, the other wouldn't think of running away. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Robber 12 wouldn't leave alone. She also didn't dare to act recklessly. The other end of the string tied to Robber 11's leg was in Xiao Xian's hands. She didn't have the confidence to kill Xiao Xian before Xiao Xian made his move. She could only wait for an opportunity. We're almost there. I remember it's around here, Robber 11 said as he moved his ankle. If he didn't use a knife to cut them, he wouldn't have been able to break free from those threads. The more he struggled, the tighter they became. Now his entire leg was numb. If one of his legs was crippled, he wouldn't be able to keep his title as Robber 11. He couldn't accept the fact that he couldn't get into the top 10 and fell to 11th place. Only by squeezing into the top 10 could they learn more secrets and obtain more attractive things. Their status in the tribe would also be greatly improved. He didn't want to risk losing a leg, so he was willing to compromise. He only hoped that Xiao Xian would really let him go. Robber 11 recalled the first time he met this kid. Back then, this kid wasn't that strong. Getting rid of him was child's play. How could there be such a huge change in just 2 years? Yes, Xiao Xian memorized the surrounding terrain. Next time, if no one led the way, he could come here himself. He could even fill in the gaps on the incomplete map. Yinjiao's patrol team had received the message from Xiao Xian and turned back. As for the people from the Feather Tribe, Tianshan Tribe, and Hui Tribe, they lost track of Xiao Xian and Robber 11 and Robber 12 after they entered the forest. Xiao Xian wasn't interested in knowing where they went, whether they continued to search or return to Yinjiao. Now, no one was following them. Logically speaking, Robber 11 and Robber 12 should be happy that no one was following them. 2 against 1, they should have the advantage. However, it didn't feel that way. Instead, they became more cautious. Xiao Xian dared to follow them alone. Either he was too arrogant and stupid, or he wasn't afraid of them playing tricks on him. For the sake of his leg, Robber 11 decided to be honest. He had to think carefully about his escape plan. This kid didn't seem like someone who would fool around. It's over there. Robber 11 pointed to Xiao Xian. At the same time, he paid attention to Xiao Xian's expression to see if Xiao Xian had any killing intent towards them. Xiao Xian looked over and saw that the area between the 2 hills was just an ordinary grassland. The ground was overgrown with weeds. Robber 12 noticed Robber 11's gaze. She hesitated for a moment before walking over and taking a knife. Both of them had a habit of leaving a mark where they hid something that no one else could see. It was a mark that only the 2 of them could understand. Hence, after Robber 12 went over, he quickly found the right place to stab. She removed the layer of soil on top, revealing a square stone slab that was about 1 meter long. The stone slab was thick, so Robber 12 had a hard time prying it open. Although they ran fast, they weren't strong enough. Robber 11 wanted to go over and help, but Xiao Xian walked over and reached out his hand that wasn't holding the silk thread. He grabbed the thick stone slab and lifted it up along with the layer of soil that was still covering it. Seeing Xiao Xian lift the thick slab of stone as easily as peeling off tree bark with one hand, the 2 of them were impressed by the strength of the Flaming Horn tribesmen. It's down there. Robber 12 and Robber 11 looked at each other. They jumped down first and led the way. The cave below was relatively deep, but it wasn't very long. The storage area was only about 70 to 80 square meters. However, it was very sturdy. It was supported by stone pillars and stone slabs. Otherwise, it wouldn't have lasted for so long. That was why Xiao Xian had a clear view of the cave after just a few steps. Robber 12 took out a water moonstone and lit up the cave. She pointed at the 3 skeletons leaning against the wall. We found a thing on them. They didn't mention the words longevity leaf to Xiao Xian. They thought that Xiao Xian might not know what it was. He just referred to it as thing and treasure. Now that they thought about it, they regretted it. Why did they bury it in Yinjiao? They should have left it here. If not, they might have been able to squeeze into the top 10 of the robbers' list with the longevity leaf. Would those vulgar people in Yinjiao know the true value of the longevity leaf? It was best if they didn't know. If they had the chance, they would sneak into Yinjiao and steal it back. Unfortunately, they couldn't find out Xiao Xian's intentions. They also didn't know what Xiao Xian was thinking. Xiao Xian approached the skeletons. Their clothes were no longer recognizable, and there were no distinctive items on them to prove their identity. However, from the hardness of their bones and the degree of preservation, these people must have been powerful warriors. The stronger they were, the better their bones were preserved. Xiao Xian still remembered the wooden cylinder that held the longevity leaf. After so many years, the color of the cylinder had changed. However, to be able to preserve it for hundreds or even thousands of years without rotting, it was still a rare high-quality wood. The longevity leaf inside was even better. When he took it out, it was as fresh as new. The longevity leaf recorded the not divination of the Yi tribe. It was made a long time ago by the people of the Yi tribe. It was similar to what Xiao Xian learned from the Yi family in the royal city. For it to appear on this side of the sea, it must have been brought here by the people who came through the sea passage 1,000 years ago. Looking at the posture of the skeletons, Xiao Xian asked Robber 11 and Robber 12, "When you came here, did you move them?" The two who were communicating with their eyes were startled by Xiao Xian's sudden question. "No, we flipped them up and looked at them, but we restored them later." They were thieves, but they were still respectful towards these corpses that had been preserved for so many years. They wouldn't break the bones and throw them away. Xiao Xian looked at the posture of the 3 skeletons. They were all facing the same direction, as if they were looking at something. Following the empty eye sockets, Xiao Xian found the answer on a stone pillar. There were many words and patterns engraved on the stone pillars. Some of them might have been left behind by the small, unknown tribe that first lived here, and some of them were written in the language of this place. One of the pictures seemed to be mixed with other words and pictures. Those who didn't know wouldn't be able to tell. This was also why Robber 11 and Robber 12 didn't pay attention to it. Different tribes had different styles of pictures. Robber 11 and Robber 12 didn't pay much attention to this small tribe that didn't even make a splash in history. That was why they didn't pay much attention to most of the words and pictures on the pillar. The carvings on the stone pillar looked like some kind of plant. However, Xiao Xian was already very surprised when he saw the carvings. This was the Ji family's family tattoo in the royal city on the other side of the sea. It was the Ji tribe's totem tattoo in the early years. Back then, when the passage under the sea rose, a group of people came from the other side of the sea. Other than the Mu and Yi family, there were also people from the Ji family. However, now that the Mu family changed their surname to Shur and dominated the desert, the Ji family died here. The people who came here had a lot of internal conflicts. What were the 3 Ji family members trying to do by stealing things from the Yi family? Unfortunately, 1,000 years had passed, and Xiao Xian didn't know what they were thinking. Xiao Xian looked carefully again, but didn't find anything. Other than the Ji family tattoo, there was nothing else on the pillar. The Ji family tattoo seemed to be the last trace left behind by the 3 of them. Walking out of the cave, Xiao Xian didn't reply to Robber 11's probing. He just let them go as promised. Once they were free, Robber 11 and Robber 12 didn't bother to probe Xiao Xian anymore. They just wanted to escape. Looking at the 2 escaping figures, Xiao Xian turned around and walked back to the cave. The Ji family had a habit. They would put grains in their graves. Judging from the looks of the 3 people in the cave, they should be prepared to die. If so, did they follow the customs of their tribe? Looking at the tribal tattoo they left behind, they should still have deep feelings for the Ji family. Xiao Xian had already carefully checked the cave below, but he didn't find any grains. Perhaps they had already rotted into dust, or perhaps they were eaten by other underground creatures. However, Xiao Xian had a feeling that this wasn't the end. If they followed the customs of the Ji family, they should have placed a container for grains. It didn't have to be pottery, it could have been something else. But in reality, there was nothing. If they knew they were going to die and never return, what would they do if they had grains in their hands? Chapter 5:24. If it wasn't hidden in the underground cave, could it have been scattered on the ground? With the intention of probing, Xiao Xian walked around the cave and found a few plants that looked like grains. However, they didn't look like something the Ji family would leave behind because most of them belonged to the land here. Xiao Xian had seen similar plants in various places before. He heard that in the early years, there were tribes that planted them. However, as time went by, people gradually forgot about them due to the discovery of a higher yield type of grain. The reason he could see these grains that were popular thousands of years ago was because a small tribe used to live here. Moreover, the underground cave was left behind by that unknown tribe. The underground cave was used as a granary to store grains, so there would be some scattered on the ground. However, these weren't something the Ji family would care about. Even thousands of years ago, they wouldn't have brought these grains with them. If the Ji family carried them around, they must have thought that they were more precious. After looking around again, Xiao Xian still couldn't find anything. Could it be that the 3G family members really didn't bring any seeds? Or perhaps the seeds they brought had all rotted into dust? Or could it be that someone had already come here and dug everything away? No, that shouldn't be the case. Robber 11 and Robber 12 had only been here for 2 to 3 years. If someone came here earlier, they would have found the underground cave, and the longevity leaf wouldn't have been taken away by Robber 11 and Robber 12. Was he wrong? Xiao Xian stood at the entrance of the cave and looked around. There were a lot of weeds and all sorts of unknown plants. There weren't many trees, only a few saplings that weren't growing well and a few scattered shrubs. Hence, the place seemed more spacious. There were indeed fewer trees in this place. The weeds looked lush, but that was only because there were many of them. When they were gathered together, they looked especially lush. However, when they were separated, each one of them didn't look as good. He thought about the environment where the 1,000-grain gold grew. When they grew, they would steal all the nutrients from the surrounding soil. It was extremely overbearing. Although it wasn't as obvious here, there was a similar trend. There must be something here. Xiao Xian scanned his surroundings again, but this time he didn't look for grain-like plants. Instead, he looked at all the plants that grew on the ground. Then his gaze stopped on a plant that didn't even reach his knees. Earlier, Xiao Xian had been looking for grains and hadn't noticed these plants. Now that he looked at them again, he felt that they were familiar. Xiao Xian often ran around in the forest, so he would find the plants in the forest familiar. However, this time, it was not the plants he had seen in the forest. After thinking about it carefully, Xiao Xian felt that this was very similar to a plant he had seen in Jiju's field. At that time, Xiao Xian had gone to look for Jiju. Jiju had brought him around the golden grain fields, and he had seen many of the plants that were commonly grown there. There were crops for daily consumption and some more special plants. Among them, there was a plant that Jiju called veins of the sky. In the golden grain fields, there was a large plot of land specially set aside to grow it. Usually, there were people guarding it. The slaves were not allowed to go there at all, and the stewards had to take care of it personally. However, Jiju didn't say much at that time and left with Xiao Xian. The golden grain fields were famous for their grains. Jiju had mainly introduced Xiao Xian to grains, so they had only walked past the place where veins of the sky were planted. Xiao Xian didn't have a deep impression of it. If he hadn't seen this plant here, he wouldn't have remembered what veins of the sky looked like. The plant not far away looked very similar to the veins of the sky planted in Jiju's field. However, in comparison, the ones planted in Jiju's field had more leaves and grew better. The ones here were very shriveled. If one didn't look closely, they wouldn't be able to associate it with the dense foliage of the plants. This was one of the reasons why Xiao Xian didn't notice it at first. As for the veins of the sky, Xiao Xian had only seen its surface part and had never seen its underground part. The only thing he knew was that the most precious part of the veins of the sky was all underground. Moreover, the veins of the sky looked very similar to the distribution of the meridians in the human body. They were born this way, so they were named veins of the sky. Was it really veins of the sky? Were these brought here by the 3G family members? After discovering one, Xiao Xian looked around. He saw a few more, but they weren't big and didn't grow as well as the ones in the golden grain fields. Xiao Xian stabbed his sword into the ground and took out a dagger. He planned to dig one up first. After taking 2 steps, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. Xiao Xian tilted his head and looked at a bush about 10 meters away from him. He had always thought that it was just an ordinary bush growing here, but now he felt that something was wrong. He turned around and walked towards a shrub. When he got closer, he realized that it wasn't a shrub, but a plant with many branches. The leaves on the branches weren't very big, but when compared to the vein of the heavens, he realized that the leaves on the branches were exactly the same. The only difference was that the stem of the veins of the sky wasn't made of wood. The one Xiao Xian saw in the golden grain fields wasn't made of wood either, but this one was. This veins of the sky could be said to be the best growing plant in this area. Although it was only half the height of a person, it was the largest of all the other veins of the heavens in the area. If the veins of the sky weren't herbs that only grew for a few years but could turn into wood and grow endlessly, then could this biggest veins of the sky have been left behind by the G family? But after 1,000 years, this was the only change the veins of the sky had. No matter what, this was still a huge discovery. Xiao Xian was excited. Although he was anxious to see how the biggest veins of the sky grew, he didn't touch it directly. He didn't know what the underground part of the veins of the sky was like. If he wasn't careful, he might accidentally destroy treasure. So, Xiao Xian walked back, took the dagger, and carefully dug out the small one he had found earlier. Bit by bit, the soil was removed. This plant that didn't even reach Xiao Xian's knee revealed its roots. There were many roots. If not for the different stems and leaves, Xiao Xian would have thought he was digging up ginseng. However, this root was even finer and more numerous than ginseng. Xiao Xian was even more careful, trying his best to dig out this veins of the sky. The more he dug, the more shocked he became. When he saw the complete veins of the sky, Xiao Xian felt a chill run down his spine. It was too similar. It was too similar. When Xiao Xian first heard about the veins of the sky from Jiju, he only knew that the most useful underground part of the veins of the sky looked very similar to a human's meridians. Now that he saw it for himself, he knew how similar it was. The roots he dug out were no more than the length of a palm. Each of the thin roots seemed to correspond to a meridian in the human body. Which part was thick, which part was thin, which part was long, which part was short, which part was forked. More than 90% of them corresponded. The veins of the sky lived up to its name. Xiao Xian didn't know what the veins of the sky were used for. Jiju didn't mention it at the time, only telling Xiao Xian that it was a plant used for medicinal purposes. However, looking at it, it should be related to meridians, right? After digging out one, Xiao Xian looked around again. Now that he was looking for the veins of the sky instead of staring at the grains, he realized that there were quite a few veins of the sky growing in this area. Xiao Xian just looked around 50 meters and saw more than 20. However, those were not big and didn't grow very well. Perhaps the biggest one had stolen all the nutrients. Xiao Xian planned to dig these up and bring them back to take a look. It would be even better if they could be transplanted. Since Jiju was willing to open up such a large piece of land in the field just to plant the veins of the sky, and even guarded it with so many soldiers, it must be something extraordinary. After chasing Robber 11 and Robber 12 for so long and spending so much time running here, Xiao Xian didn't plan to return to the tribe tonight. He decided to stay here and guard it first. He went to the forest to hunt a wild boar and found some fruits for dinner. During the hunt, Xiao Xian saw a flying squirrel being hunted. This kind of thing happened all the time in the forest and could be seen everywhere. If it was in the past, Xiao Xian wouldn't even look at it. However, today, Xiao Xian stepped in and saved the injured flying squirrel that was about to be swallowed. It wasn't that Xiao Xian suddenly decided to be kind. He thought of the veins of the sky and wanted to use this flying squirrel to test its use. The flying squirrel that was tied up by Xiao Xian screamed in fear and struggled with all its might. However, it couldn't break free from the rope no matter how hard it tried. He waited for Xiao Xian to finish off the wild boar and fill his stomach before bringing the flying squirrel over. He didn't bring it too close. This little thing's claws were sharp and it could bite. Xiao Xian held the flying squirrel in one hand and the veins of the sky that he dug up today with the other hand. He moved the roots towards the flying squirrel. When the roots of veins of the sky reached the flying squirrel tried to avoid them. Xiao Xian continued moving the roots of veins of the sky closer to the flying squirrel's mouth. The flying squirrel was forced into a corner and bit down. Then it froze. However, it only froze for a second. Soon, the flying squirrel crazily gnawed at the roots of veins of the sky. It was as fast as a chef cutting vegetables. Only a series of crunching sounds could be heard. The roots of veins of the sky that were close to the flying squirrel's mouth quickly disappeared. When Xiao Xian pulled back the veins of the sky, the flying squirrel was still struggling. It looked reluctant and stretched its neck out, wanting to continue gnawing. Xiao Xian didn't give it any more veins of the sky. He quietly observed the flying squirrel's changes. Many animals had a natural instinct and intuition to find herbs. They knew what was good for them and when to eat it. Since it was so eager, veins of the sky must be very useful. Chapter 525. Before the root of vein of the sky was broken, its smell was similar to that of ordinary tree roots. Xiao Xian did not smell anything special. Even this flying squirrel, when Xiao Xian extended vein of the sky to it, was very reluctant at first. It only thought that vein of the sky was a threat from Xiao Xian, a stranger. However, when this flying squirrel bit off one of vein of the sky's thin roots, a light, bitter smell wafted out. Xiao Xian had never tasted it before, so he did not dare to eat it carelessly. Eating carelessly in the forest could lead to death. Even totemic warriors with relatively strong stomachs could not avoid this. Not long ago, someone saw a plant in the forest that looked very similar to the vegetables they grew. After eating a little, he ended up having diarrhea for 2 days. Therefore, Xiao Xian could only use this flying squirrel as a test subject. After Xiao Xian took back vein of the sky, this flying squirrel struggled fiercely at first, wanting nothing more than to follow the vein of the sky. But soon its struggling slowed down. Finally, as if it had fallen asleep, it did not move at all. Only the slight rise and fall of its body proved that it was still alive. However, the wounds on the flying squirrel's body were bloody and deep. The wounds on its back and other parts of its body had stopped bleeding long ago. Not only that, the blood had coagulated and was forming scabs. On its leg, where a piece of flesh had been torn off, it was also changing. If this flying squirrel's injuries were left untreated, it might not survive the night. It had lost too much blood, and there were many bite wounds. It could not even walk. The longer it was delayed, the worse its injuries would worsen. But now it was recovering. There were still some sparks in the fire. After eating the wild boar, Xiao Xian did not add any more firewood. Now, in order to see the flying squirrel's changes more clearly, Xiao Xian held up the water moonstone to light up the fire. Wild beasts approached, their green eyes flashing in the forest. However, Xiao Xian's aura was very strong. They felt that he was not easy to deal with, so they lingered for a while before leaving unwillingly. Xiao Xian had been observing the changes on the flying squirrel's body. He did not have time to care about the wild beasts, so he did not hide his aura. He released his aura to intimidate the wild beasts that wanted to approach, saving him a lot of trouble. Xiao Xian sat on the ground and tied the flying squirrel's rope to a tree branch. He did not sleep for the entire night, so he kept an eye on the flying squirrel. Early in the morning, the flying squirrel, who had been tied to the tree, moved and woke up from his deep sleep. When he woke up, he probably remembered that he was tied up. Fei Shu's movements became more violent, especially when he saw Xiao Xian. He screamed in protest. Although Xiao Xian had given it the vein of the sky and saved its life, it would not let down its guard against Xiao Xian just because of this. Wild animals were very cautious. If it let go, it would bite Xiao Xian again. Xiao Xian looked at the scabs on its body. As the flying squirrel struggled, the scabs fell off, revealing a patch of soft, hairless skin. The most serious injury was its leg. Although it was still sunken, it was much better than the bone-deep injury he saw yesterday. Perhaps it would recover soon. Looking at the strength of its struggle, it was clear that the flying squirrel was very energetic. There was no trace of death in it. After staying up all night, Xiao Xian did not feel tired at all. Instead, he was very excited. Originally, he wanted to follow the two thieves here to find out about the longevity leaf's origin. He did not expect to find something like this. The Ji family did not carry ordinary things with them. The vein of the sky was indeed a very powerful herb. No wonder Ji Ju was willing to give up such a large plot of land to plant it. After feeding the flying squirrel a little of the vein of the sky that he had dug out, Xiao Xian wrapped the rest in soil and leaves to prevent the smell of the vein of the sky from spreading. An unbitten vein of the sky would not attract the attention of other animals. However, once the smell of the roots leaked out, Xiao Xian could not be sure if it would attract other animals. Looking at the spirited flying squirrel, then at the huge vein of the sky, Xiao Xian's eyes burned with passion. This trip was worth it. Xiao Xian circled around this area and expanded his search. He estimated that there were no less than 50 vein of the sky. This number was naturally not as many as the ones in Ji Ju's field. However, Xiao Xian was already very satisfied. With these vein of the sky, he might even be able to obtain the seeds of the vein of the sky. Xiao Xian had another guess. After so many years, only 50 vein of the sky survived. Perhaps the main reason was because of the largest vein of the sky. Just like the 1,000-grain gold, in the competition for nutrients, only those who won would survive. Those who lost would become nutrients for other plants. Thousands of years had passed. Countless seeds fell on the ground, and countless plants sprouted. However, only a few survived. These were the final winners. Perhaps, if the land continued to become barren, some of them would not be able to survive. However, Xiao Xian had found them. If possible, Xiao Xian hoped to transplant all of these back to the tribe. If they were given enough nutrients and space, would these vein of the sky break free from their slow growth and start a new cycle of growth? These were the legacies left behind by the 3G family members who died here. Thousands of years had passed, and no one had been able to obtain their legacies. Not even the longevity leaf was counted. The longevity leaf that recorded the art of not divination belonged to the E family. However, the legacies that truly belonged to the G family were these vein of the sky that had been quietly growing here. Xiao Xian took a deep breath and calmed himself down. He did not know why the 3G family members would bring the E family's things here. He also did not know what kind of people the 3G family members were. However, Xiao Xian had to thank them for their legacies. Looking around, Xiao Xian walked further away and then climbed up the hill over there. In this area, only the top of the hill was the highest point. Xiao Xian wanted to take a good look at this area from above. He wanted to see if there was anything else he had overlooked. Looking down from the top of the hill, he had a panoramic view of the area above the cave. Under the domineering vein of the sky, there were not many other plants that could grow well. Even if they could, their growth would be sluggish. Xiao Xian could see all of these plants clearly from his vantage point. His gaze swept across the ground below, away from the area around the cave, and into the distance. There, the grass was denser. In the calm, all sorts of plants fought for nutrients, silently killing each other without anyone noticing. Over there, it was an ordinary mountainous area. There was no strong or weak distribution like the vein of the sky. Xiao Xian decided to stop here and head down the hill to dig up the vein of the sky. Suddenly, he saw a familiar figure. That was Xiao Xian looked over, his eyes almost popping out of their sockets. Cabbage. Chapter 5:26. Xiao Xian couldn't believe his eyes when he suddenly saw this familiar figure. He stared at it carefully for a while to make sure he wasn't mistaken. Then, he hurried down the hill and walked in that direction. He hadn't paid much attention to it when he was walking in the forest. He even walked back and forth a few times, but he didn't pay attention to the figure that looked like a cabbage. It was because it was too big. There were all kinds of strange plants in the forest. Xiao Xian didn't know how many plants that looked like leaves he had seen, so he didn't pay much attention to it when he walked past. But standing on the hill and looking down, Xiao Xian couldn't calm down when he saw the figure clearly. The leaves were quite similar, but its appearance was too similar to a cabbage. It was just that this cabbage was taller than Xiao Xian himself. Xiao Xian came to the plant that looked like a cabbage and took a closer look. He could hear the sound of something shattering in his ears. Turning his head to look, Xiao Xian saw a bug as thick as an arm lying on a wide leaf outside the cabbage. It was gnawing a hole in the leaf. Probably sensing Xiao Xian's arrival, the unfamiliar aura gave it a sense of crisis. It stopped gnawing on the leaf and raised the front half of its body to face Xiao Xian. If Xiao Xian hadn't been prepared and knew that this was just a bug gnawing on a leaf, he might have mistaken it for a snake when he saw such a scene. The spots and patterns on the front of the bug looked like a green, poisonous snake in the forest. Even the fine lines on the scales were very clear, especially the two lines that looked like eyes. It was very scary. Suddenly, it looked like a snake was staring at him. This was also one of the bug's life-saving methods. However, Xiao Xian had seen many similar bugs, so he wasn't scared by it. He even stood to the side and observed it with interest for a while. Perhaps it felt that Xiao Xian was no longer in danger, so the bug crawled back and continued to gnaw on the leaf. Some bugs in the forest would take years or even longer to transform into butterflies or moths. This bug was probably not far from transforming. Xiao Xian moved his gaze away from the bug and continued to look at the cabbage in front of him. He raised his hand and cut off a piece of the leaf with a dagger. He sniffed it and found it to be okay. There wasn't any strange smell, but Xiao Xian didn't eat it. He might not be able to eat something that the bug could eat. He took the leaf and walked over to the flying squirrel that was hanging on the tree. Unfortunately, the flying squirrel didn't show any interest in the leaf. It only bit when it was irritated, it didn't eat it, and spat it out. After a few tries, Xiao Xian watched as the flying squirrel bit the leaf angrily. Nothing happened, and Xiao Xian was overjoyed. He stopped tormenting the flying squirrel. He walked around the surrounding forest. Because of the vein of the sky, the other plants didn't grow well near the hole. Xiao Xian didn't see any plants that looked like cabbages, so he had to look further away. Just like the one he had just found, it was found a little further away from the cave. It was quite a strong plant to be able to squeeze out a place to grow in the forest. Xiao Xian hadn't paid attention to it before because he hadn't paid attention to plants that were taller. Now that he followed the leaf, it didn't take long for him to find about 30 of them, and this was only the one in the vicinity. There were even more small plants on the ground that hadn't grown yet. Some of them had obvious traces of being trampled by forest animals, while others had been bitten and had incomplete leaves. There were too many seedlings like this, so Xiao Xian did not count them. If they were left alone, they would not survive. They would either be trampled to death by the animals in the forest or starved to death by other plants. After looking around, Xiao Xian returned to the hole. Last night, he had been watching the flying squirrel and the effects of the vein of the sky. He hadn't slept at all. Today, he had been running around since early morning. He was a little tired, so he sat down on the grass to rest. He ate the leftover meat from yesterday to relieve his hunger. Xiao Xian thought about the origin of these cabbages. Did they really grow here naturally? There were also people who grew vegetables here. The leaves were about 60% similar to cabbages, but the leaves were much longer and narrower. Moreover, the vegetables that were commonly grown here had fat roots. The people in the tribe mainly ate the roots, and the leaves were just a side dish. The vegetables that were commonly grown in the fields here were large, but most of them were only as tall as Xiao Xian's waist. If they were too small, the people in the tribe wouldn't be willing to grow them. But compared to the cabbages here, they were nothing. Mutated? Xiaoxian suddenly thought of the vegetables that were grown on the other side of the sea. There are also crops similar to cabbages over there. Xiaoxian had seen them in the fields of Jeju. However, although the leaves of the vegetables over there were wide, they grew too scattered and were very short. They only reached Xiaoxian's knees. Many tribes on the other side of the sea didn't grow that. They felt that the yield was too low and it wasn't enough to fill their hunger. But the slave owners liked it. Only the slave masters in King's City who liked these vegetables would set aside a large amount of land in their own fields to grow these vegetables in order to eat them. So, on the other side of the sea, only the slave owners had the seeds of these vegetables. The cabbages around here weren't the type that the people here often grew. They were also different from the ones grown in the fields of the slave owners on the other side of the sea. Of course, there were many similarities. But so far, after going to so many places, even in mountains and forests, Xiaoxian had never seen such cabbages. After thinking for a while, Xiaoxian's eyes suddenly widened. He thought of a possibility. This used to be the territory of an unknown small tribe. They also knew how to grow crops. The surrounding terrain was relatively flat, and they might have grown the vegetables that were commonly grown by the tribes on the mainland. So, even if the small tribe migrated, there would more or less be some vegetables left behind. What if the G family didn't just plant the seeds of the sky here, but also the seeds of some other vegetables? What if the 3G family members in the cave scattered a handful of vegetable seeds around here before they died? There were two similar, yet different vegetables growing here. Would they give birth to a descendant that had the strengths of both? Perhaps Xiaoxian was overthinking it. But what if it was true? If it was true, Xiaoxian could only say that it was the will of the heavens. If it was artificially grown, who knew how long it would take to get a satisfactory vegetable? Even the vegetables that were grown in many tribes today had to be filtered generation after generation. Here, different varieties of vegetables from the two continents grew together and obtained offspring that fused the characteristics of both sides. Then, after a long period of natural combination and selection, the offspring that survived today, that fused the advantages of both sides, and that had the strongest adaptability and the most stable inheritance, the cabbage. Not only were these Chinese cabbages large in size, they were also in the shape of a ball. Unlike the leaves on the other side of the sea, these Chinese cabbages here, other than the large leaves on the outside, had a tendency to wrap around the core, forming an upright oval ball. Regardless of whether it was the result of crossbreeding or the mutation of the vegetables planted here, Xiaoxian was very satisfied just by looking at the shape. Now, the only question was, could it be eaten? No matter what, he had to chop one first. Xiaoxian chose the first one he saw and chopped the big vegetable ball in the middle with his sword. The few leaves on the outside looked too old and were not easy to carry, so he only chopped the ball into an oval shape. The vegetable ball was taller than him and heavier, which made Xiaoxian even more satisfied. The fact that it was heavier meant that there were more leaves forming the vegetable ball, unlike the other leaves. If it was edible, the yield would be higher. Carrying the vegetable ball on his shoulder, Xiaoxian went to the cave. He thought of something and turned around to look at the flying squirrel hanging on the tree. There was only a broken straw rope left. It must have run away when he was looking for the Chinese cabbages. To be able to bite the rope, it must have had a lot of strength. It must have used up a lot of energy to struggle. It seemed that the flying squirrel's injuries were almost healed. The veins of the sky around it had no signs of being bitten, which meant that the flying squirrel did not notice the veins of the sky growing here. The veins of the sky that were not cut open were not much different from normal tree roots. It was indeed hard to notice. Robber 11 and Robber 12 had stolen many treasures over the years, but they never thought that there was such a precious thing growing here. Perhaps they had never thought about plants at all. After all, who would just throw a treasure on the ground? After cleaning up the surrounding traces, Xiaoxian wrapped the veins of the sky and put it in his animal skin bag. He then pulled some big leaves and straw rope to wrap the vegetable ball and left. Xiaoxian did not plan to do anything here for the time being. He was alone now, so it was impossible for him to take everything away, especially the biggest veins of the sky, which required more careful excavation and protection. He also wanted to try transplanting the veins of the sky back to the tribe, so he needed more help. The other veins of the sky here and the Chinese cabbages were all treasures. Xiao Xian planned to get people to dig them all up when he returned to the tribe. After everything was settled, Xiao Xian carried the vegetable ball and left. He chased after the robbers for a whole night and did not return. The tribe's warriors patrolling the border paid attention to any movements in the distance. When they saw Xiao Xian's figure, the patrolling warriors did not recognize him because he was too far away. Plus, Xiao Xian was carrying a big vegetable ball, which was very strange. When they got closer and saw that it was Xiao Xian, the patrolling warriors happily went to welcome him. They did not know what Xiao Xian was carrying, but since the great elder carried it back personally, it must be something extraordinary. Not only the patrolling warriors, but the others were also curious when they saw Xiao Xian carrying an unknown object back. It was very big, so it was hard to ignore. Xiao Xian did not explain much to them. He just carried the vegetable ball and rushed into the forest towards the tribe. His footsteps were hurried, and he disappeared in a flash. Chapter 5:27. As soon as Xiao Xian rushed into the tribe, he called for the shamanists, chief, and team leaders. Not long after, the two shamanesses rushed into the house. The two chiefs and 3 team leaders also rushed over. According to the messenger, Xiao Xian came back in a hurry for something. He didn't say why Xiao Xian wanted to see them, but they heard that it was urgent. If it was just a small matter, Xiao Xian wouldn't have summoned them in such a hurry. So, they all put down what they were doing and rushed over. They knew that Xiao Xian went to chase after the bandits, so they were relieved to see him come back safely. But why was he in such a hurry? As soon as they stepped through the door, the first thing they saw was a big bag placed there. "What's this?" asked the shamaness. Xiao Xian untied the rope and big leaves that wrapped the vegetable ball, revealing the green vegetable ball inside. This house was where the tribe usually held meetings and discussed important matters. The door of the stone house had been widened, so Xiao Xian didn't feel crowded when he carried the vegetable ball in. On the way, Xiao Xian also tried his best not to let the vegetable ball hit the branches, so until now the vegetable ball was still in good condition. "I found something. I think it might be useful," said Xiao Xian. As he spoke, someone came in. It was Guang Yi. When Xiao Xian returned to the tribe, he saw Guang Yi outside the fearsome beast forest. He was patrolling the newly opened fields, so he asked him to bring 2 birds over. The birds that Guang Yi brought in were the dumb birds that the Lu tribe had just shipped over. Dumb birds were the large birds raised by the Lu tribe. Xiao Xian had seen them before. Because their upper limbs had deteriorated, they couldn't fly. Their bodies were fat, and their legs were thick and fleshy, so they were raised by the Lu tribe as food. Perhaps because they were tamed by the Lu tribe, these birds lost their original wildness. They were much dumber than the beasts in the forest, so they were called dumb birds. Yin Jiao had expanded and created many fields and animal pens on Wanchu's land. The animal pens were naturally for breeding. They had already bought some baby beasts from the Lu tribe. The first batch of dumb bird chicks had arrived. They were much bigger than adult ducks. After all, their eggs were big, so the birds that hatched would naturally be bigger than other birds. Xiao Xian asked Guang Yi to bring in the chicks and an adult dumb bird. The chicks were small, so they were brought into the stone house. The adult dumb bird was placed on the wooden cart. "Why did you bring dumb birds here?" asked Ao. "Let's see if they're edible." As he spoke, he tore off 2 leaves from the vegetable ball and handed them to the baby dumb bird. The other leaf was placed next to the adult dumb bird's mouth. Although they had already tried it with a flying squirrel, they had to be careful. What if something happened to the people in the tribe who ate it? Xiao Xian had planned to feed the birds if they didn't eat the leaves. Unexpectedly, both the chicks and the adult dumb birds were happily pecking at the leaves. Even though they were tied to the wooden cart, the dumb birds were energized when they saw food. They pecked at the leaves very quickly. In comparison, the chicks were much slower. Seeing Xiao Xian's actions, the people in the house understood what Xiao Xian meant. They looked at the dumb birds who were happily munching on the leaves, and their faces lit up. "This is edible," said Zheng Luo excitedly. Every time they found an edible food, they felt a sense of accomplishment. It was one thing for them to eat ferocious beasts. After so many years, they had gained experience in dealing with them. However, plant-based food was their weakness. Being able to eat meant that they could try to grow food. Even if they, the totem warriors, didn't usually eat food, they could feed it to the women and children in the tribe. In addition to meat, they would also eat some fruits and other grains. The seeds they brought back from the other side of the sea hadn't borne fruit yet. Now, they only ate a few kinds of food. If there was one more kind of food that could be widely grown, they would be happy, even if it wasn't enough to satisfy their hunger. They didn't lack food. With a fearsome beast forest behind them, they could hunt. There were also large fields and animal pens outside. They had enough food. They could afford to try planting. Being able to plant new crops was also a proof of their tribe's ability. They would be proud of themselves. Just like this time, when the big tribes came, they learned to be smart. They didn't bring gold, but instead brought their own specialties. Some are more expensive, some are more ordinary. Among the ordinary gifts, there were a few that the Yinjiao people had never seen before. They were all grown within the tribes. In the past, when they lacked food, they didn't care. But now it was different. They felt that a tribe that could grow all kinds of food was more impressive. Duo Kong looked at the big ball of vegetables Xiao Xian brought back and smiled meaningfully. He could use it to show off. When he went to other tribes in the future, he would give them a big ball of vegetables. Yinjiao's specialty? That sounded good. Who said Yinjiao couldn't grow good things? How could a normal person grow such a big ball of vegetables? Everyone in the stone house stared at the vegetable ball with a deep look in their eyes. However, Xiao Xian did not know what they were thinking. He was watching the two dumb birds for their reactions. 10 minutes passed. The dumb bird chick pooped in the stone house. It was a little tired, but it was still in good spirits. As for the one outside, it was even more energetic. It was clamoring to eat more. Seeing that there were no problems, Duo Kong rolled up his sleeves. "Why don't I try it first?" "Wait, there's no rush." Xiao Xian stopped Duo Kong from pulling the leaves. "How can there be no rush? If it's really edible, we should quickly dig some back and plant it. What if the other tribes get first?" Duo Kong still wanted to use it to show off. "That's not the most important thing." As he spoke, Xiao Xian took out the vein of the sky wrapped in leaves from the animal skin bag. When he wrapped it, he put soil inside. After removing the soil, he carefully brushed it clean with a brush. Xiao Xian held up the vein of the sky, which was missing a small part of its roots, for everyone to see. "This it feels." Gigu couldn't explain it. He just felt that it was familiar. Ta looked at the vein of the sky's roots and felt a chill. "I think I've seen it before, but I've never seen it before." Ta's words were contradictory, but everyone knew that when he said he had seen it before, he meant that he felt it was familiar. But they had never seen this plant before. Xiao Xian understood everyone's feelings. Although many people in the tribe would observe the body structure of their prey after hunting so that they could give it a fatal blow the next time they hunted, they had never done this for humans. They knew the general distribution of the meridians because when they used their totemic power, they would have a hazy feeling. Following the direction of their totemic power, they could see the meridians in their body. That was why Gue, Ta, and the others had said that he looked familiar. It looks similar to the meridians in our body. Because it grows like this, it's also called the vein of the sky. Xiao Xian said, "Vein of the sky." Zheng Luo and the old shaman shouted at the same time. When they were on the other side of the sea, they had heard about the vein of the sky, but they had never seen it before. It was said that only the people in the royal city had it. It had been many years since they last heard about the veins of the sky from the Taihe tribe. Vein of the sky? The rumored vein of the sky that can reconnect broken meridians. The old shaman's voice trembled with excitement. Duo Kong and Zheng Luo's faces were red with excitement. "That's what the vein of the sky looks like." "Xiao Xian, where did you find it?" In the room, 8 pairs of eyes stared at Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian briefly told them about his discovery of the vein of the sky and the cabbage. When they heard Xiao Xian say there might be 1,000-year-old vein of the sky there, even the usually calm shaman and chief breathed heavily. Dig it up. The two shamans shouted at the same time. The leaders were also rubbing their fists and palms. They couldn't wait to tear down that piece of land and carry it all back. As for the cabbage, Xiao Xian said, dig it up too. Dig it up, dig it up, dig it all up. Even an idiot knew the value of the vein of the sky. Yin Jiao would never give it up. The Chinese cabbage Xiao Xian was talking about had an unknown origin. Regardless of whether the Ji family was involved, it could be eaten, it could grow big, it might even grow fast. Most importantly, it was easy to survive. What were the Yin Jiao farmers afraid of? It wasn't a bad harvest. No matter how bad it was, there was still something to be gained. Their large-scale planting had just started not too long ago. Everything was still in the trial and error stage. It was impossible for them to compete with other tribes who were good at planting. There had to be a process of practice. If they could succeed, perhaps it would be a big breakthrough for the Flaming Horn tribe. It would also give everyone enough confidence and confidence. In the ancestral records, the glorious Flaming Horn tribe was not only strong in terms of fighting, but also in terms of farming, breeding, and handicrafts. The current Flaming Horn tribe had just woken up from a deep slumber. If they wanted to regain their former status, they still needed to work hard from all sides. The cabbage was a piece of juicy meat to them. They wouldn't give it up either. They discussed in the house for a while, then looked at the two dumb birds. The young one was looking around curiously, while the one outside was dozing off out of boredom. It was not poisonous and could be eaten. This solidified everyone's resolve. There wasn't much time for them to do more experiments. They were worried that someone else would find out about the land. They wanted to do more experiments and move everything back first. Thus, not long after Xiao Xian rushed back, he left with a large group of people. One of them was the chief, two of the leaders, and many of the smaller leaders. The tribe didn't want to keep it a secret either. Perhaps other tribes would secretly follow them, but the land belonged to Yin Jiao. Who would want to steal it? They didn't say much, just do it. Chapter 528. This time, Zheng Luo, Duo Kong, and Gigu went out with Xiao Xian. Generally speaking, the people on the other side of the sea had more experience in planting and digging. After all, their former neighbors were the Taihe tribe who were good at planting. The two shamans felt more at ease leaving it to them. As for why Gigu could continue to follow them instead of Ta, that was because of his white falcon. When Cha-Cha was absent, he could only rely on it for aerial warning. Although Yin Jiao knew they couldn't hide it from everyone this time, it was necessary to take precautions. Ta was very depressed about this. When his brothers from the other side of the sea came, it wasn't his turn to go out. This time, it wasn't his turn either. Hence, the people from the other tribes who were chatting with each other, and Yin Jiao saw Ta's long face when they went out. Xiao Xian led the people to the cave, where they found the vein of the sky. They looked around carefully. No one else had been here, and there were no signs of gnawing on the plants. They sighed in relief. It's here. Xiao Xian pointed out the vein of the sky to the others. Seeing the living vein of the sky, everyone was very excited. Thinking about how it would all belong to their tribe, they were even more excited. Is that the cabbage Xiao Xian mentioned? Zheng Luo looked at a cabbage in the forest. Xiao Xian had only brought back a ball of cabbage, but here was a whole one. If Xiao Xian hadn't pointed it out, Zheng Luo wouldn't have guessed it. Yes, that's it. I only cut the ball in the middle. Seeing such a big cabbage, Zheng Luo nodded in satisfaction. Without further delay, he divided the teams. Who was responsible for guarding, who was responsible for digging the cabbage, and who was responsible for digging the vein of the sky. Knowing that this place was full of treasures, the group of rough, Flaming Horn tribesmen were particularly cautious. They took small steps forward. Before they came, the shamans and chiefs had already told them what to do. Because they knew how precious these things were, they were very careful. They were overly careful, afraid that they would accidentally step on a plant and kill it. They had to be gentle when dealing with these precious plants, unlike how they usually hunted. It was difficult for Yin Jiao people to say the word gentle, considering that some people were not good at recognizing plants, and the vein of the sky was a plant that was highly valued by the tribe. Xiao Xian circled each vein of the sky so that it would be easier for others to dig. When Zheng Luo gave the order to dig, the soldiers who usually swung stone sticks thicker than a man to smash the beasts now held palm-sized shovels and carefully dug. After digging for a while, he turned his head and asked Xiao Xian, "First Elder, is this the right way for me to dig?" He dug again and asked Zheng Luo, "Chief, should we continue digging?" "Dig, dig, hurry up. Stop dilly-dallying. When are you going to finish digging like this?" Zheng Luo couldn't stand it anymore. He took out a small shovel and crouched down to dig at a small vein of the sky in front of him. His movements were bold and forceful. However, the moment the shovel touched the ground, it was as if he had stepped on the brakes. He only dug a fingernail deep. Xiao Xian couldn't stand watching these people who didn't even sweat when killing fearsome beasts starts sweating after digging a few shovels. This was the first time these people were doing something like this. They were under too much psychological pressure and were very nervous. After this, it might be better if they encountered similar situations in the future. Xiao Xian was in charge of the biggest vein of the sky. Zheng Luo came over after digging a few shovels. As the chief, Zheng Luo had to participate personally. However, no matter if it was Zheng Luo, Duo Kong, and the rest, even Gue He, who had always been calm, were all nervous when they started digging. When Xiao Xian's shovel went down, they all trembled. They were worried that Xiao Xian would damage the vein of the sky, but they also knew that it wasn't a good idea to be so nervous. In the end, they could only follow Xiao Xian and dig. Their goal was to bring the tree back and transplant it. They just had to ensure that the roots were intact. There was no need to dig up all the soil, so Xiao Xian and the others basically started digging from the outer parts. After removing the soil, Xiao Xian continued digging along the roots of the vein of the sky. Sometimes he used a shovel, sometimes he used a brush. In order to bring the vein of the sky back, they dug like they were treating an antique. In fact, although the roots of the vein of the sky looked thin, they were still very resilient and were not that fragile. Especially this vein of the sky that seemed to have been growing for thousands of years. Its roots were harder than the other small veins of the sky. When Duo Kong was digging, he accidentally shoveled too hard. When he looked over nervously, he realized that there was only a shallow shovel mark on the vein of the sky's roots. The skin was not broken. As long as they were careful, it wouldn't be a big deal. There was no need to be too nervous. This calmed them down a little. Later on, they were no longer restrained and dug more efficiently. The white falcon in the sky screeched from time to time. It was just a warning. If anyone ignored the warning and barged in, the Yinjiao people would have to take action. Caesar was brought out by Xiao Xian and defended with the other warriors in the forest. A wolf's nose was more sensitive than a human's and could detect places that the warriors overlooked. When the sun was about to set, the largest vein of the sky had been dug out. Its roots were too long, and the area it covered was much larger than the parts on the ground. It looked like it was made up of the meridians of a 10-meter-tall giant. After digging it out, Xiao Xian wrapped a large piece of linen cloth in the soil and wrapped the roots of the vein of the sky. They couldn't stay here for too long. They were carrying treasures, and they couldn't hide their movements from others. If they stayed here for a night, who knew what happened? The safest thing was to return to the tribe as soon as possible. "Are you done with the rest?" asked Xiao Xian. "Almost. We've dug out all the veins of the sky we can see, no matter the size. We still haven't dug out the small cabbages you mentioned," said Zheng Luo. "Forget about that. Wrap up the ones we dug out and bring them back. We'll dig up the rest later. You guys tidy up first. I'm going down into the cave." Xiao Xian lifted the stone slab at the entrance of the cave with a jar and jumped in. Inside the cave, the 3 skeletons were still lying there in their original positions. Perhaps they had been in this position for nearly 1,000 years. Xiao Xian had already prepared a small clay pot and placed it beside the 3 skeletons. There were some grains in the pot. According to the tribe's rules, whoever found it kept it. Whoever stole it kept it. That was why it wasn't a big deal to dig up everything here. Xiao Xian didn't think much of it. Moreover, most of the Ji family in Royal City still had a grudge against Yinjiao. The people of Royal City had hunted them down on the other side of the sea. Although he didn't know the identities of these three people or what had happened in the past, Xiao Xian still decided to come. It had nothing to do with the Ji family in Royal City or anything else. When Xiao Xian was with Jiju once said that if Xiao Xian encountered a similar situation one day, he hoped that he could place a jar of grains beside the people who couldn't go home. He didn't ask for much, just a jar of grains. Compared to the other Ji family members in Royal City, Jiju treated Yinjiao well and helped Xiao Xian a lot. The seeds and planting techniques in Yinjiao were all taught by Jiju. Xiao Xian was willing to do what Jiju said. Coming out of the hole and looking at the sky, Xiao Xian, Zheng Luo, and the others carried the things they dug up and headed back to the tribe. They wanted to get back before the sky turned completely dark. It was already late and many things couldn't be seen clearly. The people who secretly followed the Yinjiao team in the distance could only see the Yinjiao warriors carrying things. Some people went to the hole after Yinjiao left, but couldn't see anything on the ground. There were traces of digging everywhere, but they couldn't see anything important. Before the Yinjiao team left, they turned the place over again to erase the important traces. These people could only guess that the Yinjiao people had dug up something here, but couldn't know what it was. In fact, the Yinjiao people didn't keep everything a secret. There were rumors about the cabbage, so some people in the tribe knew that Xiao Xian had found a new kind of food outside and brought people to dig for it. As for the veins of the sky, even the people in the tribe didn't know about it. The next day, the people from the other tribes in Yinjiao stayed up all night with doubts. When they woke up in the morning, they heard that Yinjiao had made a big move and hurried over to take a look. A part of the newly reclaimed land had been blocked off with a tall wooden fence, leaving no gaps. There were also many soldiers standing guard outside, preventing others from approaching. The Tianshan people couldn't help but be curious. They wanted to ride their eagles up to take a look, but were forced back down by the patrolling team's arrows. The patrolling team's attitude was firm. You have to listen to me in my territory. You can't be so impudent. You're pissed? If you're pissed, you can leave. What are you still doing here? Friendly exchange? What kind of friendly exchange is this? The next time they see you, they won't just force you down. They'll shoot you down. It was rare for the Tianshan tribesmen to not start a fight. They were too curious. What did the flaming horns bring? Why are they guarding it so tightly? The others also advised them to be patient. They had to figure out Yinjiao's situation first. However, when they finally figured out what the flaming horns were growing, their interest was gone. A new kind of food? Among these tribes, which one of them had less food? Only the Tianshan and Hui tribes on the grasslands didn't plant much, so they weren't interested. A new type of food was indeed not very attractive to these tribes. Why were they guarding it so tightly for such a small thing? Yinjiao was so stingy, ignorant. At the same time, in the forest, the veins of the sky had been planted in the tribe's fields. After a few days of adaptation, the veins of the sky in the ground began to show signs of life, especially the small veins of the sky. Before, they were suppressed and their growth was slow. Now that the land was bigger, there were fewer competitors for nutrients. They were ready for a new round of growth. Looking at the veins of the sky and the ground, the two shamans smiled. The cabbages outside attracted most of the people's attention. These veins of the sky were very low-key. We have to send more people here. Definitely. We can't relax on the cabbage fields outside. Got it. As the shamans and chiefs spoke, Xiao Xian suddenly looked in a direction. What's wrong, Xiao Xian? Asked Zheng Luo. There's been a lot of thieves lately. Chapter 529. Hearing Xiao Xian's words, everyone's expression changed. Someone else is here? Ao asked. Yeah. Xiao Xian nodded, but he ran away again. After some thought, Xiao Xian said, It doesn't seem to be the same person from last time. Xiao Xian was referring to the aura he sensed in the Wanderer area not long ago. The aura he sensed now was similar to the one he sensed before, but it was different. Even the two leaders, Zheng Luo and Ao, couldn't sense it, but they didn't doubt Xiao Xian's judgment. Last time you asked the patrol team to bring him back, I did it myself. I think there's more than one person hiding in the dark, Ao said. Last time, when Xiao Xian chased after Robber 11 and Robber 12, the patrol team followed them. After that, Xiao Xian captured Robber 11 and restricted Robber 12's movements. The patrol team returned first. However, he also asked the patrol team to pass a message to Zheng Luo and Ao. After Xiao Xian released Robber 11 and Robber 12, he smeared something on their bodies. When a Yinjiao hunting team hunted, they would look for special prey. For example, they needed a part of the prey's body to be used as medicine, or they needed a horn that was suitable for polishing weapons. If the prey was good at escaping, the Yinjiao people would sprinkle some tracking powder on the prey when they first encountered them. Most of the powder had a strong smell, just like the powder they threw at the ambushers when they were ambushed on the other side of the sea. Even if the ambushers were to hide, the flaming horns would still be able to detect them once they came into contact with the powder. Among the tracking powder, there was a very faint smell. Most people couldn't smell it, but some beasts could. The powder Xiao Xian sprinkled on Robber 11 and Robber 12 was the latter kind. The smell was faint and hard to detect, but Caesar and the rest could smell it. It wouldn't completely dissipate in a short period of time. After the patrol team returned, they passed on Xiao Xian's message to Zheng Luo and Ao. They used a few beasts in the tribe with a keen sense of smell to wander around the tribe every day, closely inspecting the few areas where they could detect the smell. When Xiao Xian captured Robber 11, he learned that Robber 7 was hiding nearby. He knew that the higher the ranking, the harder it was to detect them, so he used Robber 11 and Robber 12 as a medium. The people they came into close contact with, especially those who fought with them, would definitely be tainted by the smell. According to the results, Ao's findings. After Robber 11 and 12 were released, they sneaked in again, but they were only on the outskirts. They didn't infiltrate the tribe. Although Ao Xian didn't manage to catch them, he was sure that other than Robber 11 and Robber 12, there were other people who knew the two robbers lurking nearby. Among those people, there were some who were stronger than Robber 11 and Robber 12. They were the ones Xiao Xian mentioned before, the ones who ranked higher in the robbers. It's not just Robber 11 and Robber 12. There's also Robber 7. There should be other robbers too, but they might not be united. Zheng Luo felt troubled. Anyone who was targeted by people who were good at hiding in the dark wouldn't feel good, especially when those people were famous robbers. Actually, what I'm confused about is, how did the robbers get here so quickly? Even if it's because of the result of our battle with Wanshi, there shouldn't be so many of them at once. Xiao Xian expressed his thoughts. News didn't travel fast here. The 7 tribes were able to get here quickly because they had people keeping an eye on them. What about the robbers? They were scattered all over the place and didn't keep an eye on Yinjiao from the start. But now, there were so many of them at once, and they were all top robbers too. It was hard to catch them. What did Yinjiao have that attracted them? Even if they destroyed Wanshi, it shouldn't attract so many experts. The purpose of the robbers was different from others. Their purpose was to steal, not to test their strength. In the eyes of most of the people on the mainland, the Flaming Horn tribe was still a relatively backward tribe that only had brute force. The shaman agreed. Indeed, I've heard that robbers love to steal valuable treasures. Could it be that they've taken a fancy to something in our tribe? Could it be the fire seed or the core seed? The old shaman thought for a moment. They couldn't come to a conclusion, but they had to be careful of the robbers. They didn't have to worry about the fire seed anymore, but they had to keep an eye on the core seed. Xiao Xian carefully recalled the details of when he chased after Robber 11 and Robber 12. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that those two might not have been after the longevity leaf. Perhaps the longevity leaf was just there. Otherwise, 2 years would have been more than enough time for them to sneak into Yinjiao. Why wait until now? Or let Robber 7 take a look? Speaking of which, if the one who sneaked into the Wanderers area was really Robber 7, then Robber 7's appearance was much earlier than the other tribes. Perhaps, before the battle with Wanshi, there were already people here. Something must have happened that we don't know about, Xiao Xian said in a low voice. A straw rope fell from his hand. He didn't know what happened through the knot divination, but he had a feeling that the people who came this time might not be because of Wansure. Do you think those tribesmen who have been loitering outside are hiding something from us? Xiao Xian asked. That's not impossible. It's not the first time those tribes have been hiding things from us. Ao's tone was filled with strong dissatisfaction. Those people even said they wanted to have friendly exchanges and cooperate. Cooperate my ass. Ao weighed the axe in his hand. He had the urge to go out and chop those people up. He just didn't like them. If it wasn't for the fact that he knew it wasn't good to mess with them, he would have done it already. As they were talking, someone came to Xiao Xian and told him that someone from the Hui tribe came to see him. It wasn't the two chiefs or the shaman. It was Xiao Xian. Do you know who it is? Xiao Xian asked the warrior who came to report. Gula from the Hui tribe. Just him alone? Yes. The shaman gestured to Xiao Xian. Let's go and see what he wants to say. Okay. Xiao Xian asked someone to take Gula to his room. Yinjiao's fire seed was no longer there. Even near the fire pit, there was no pressure from the fire seed. So when Gula was taken there, he didn't feel the suppression from Yinjiao's fire seed. Gula hesitated. He knew that Yinjiao's fire seed might have changed, but he couldn't figure out why. However, the fire seed was a secret of the tribe. If the Yinjiao people didn't want to talk about it, he couldn't get anything out of them. Continuing to ask would only make him more disgusted. This time, he came to find Xiao Xian for something else. In Xiao Xian's room, Old Ku was in another room making stoneware. Caesar was guarding the door, so they weren't afraid of being eavesdropped. What's the matter? Xiao Xian handed Gula a cup of tea brewed with herb leaves. Gula drank a little absent-mindedly. The bitter taste made him frown, but he didn't care. After a sip, he put down the cup, thought for a while, and said to Xiao Xian, "Did you find any suspicious people around?" "You mean the two people I chased a few days ago?" Xiao Xian looked up at Gula. Although Gula looked calm, there was hesitation in his eyes. His fingers on his legs were tapping, as if he was thinking about a decision. After a pause, Gule's eyes finally settled, and his tone became more serious. "No, it's not just them. There may be more." Xiao Xian's heart jumped. There really was an inside story? "What do you mean?" Gula didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, Our tribes have been focusing on the desert for the past 2 years. If there's any movement in the desert, we'll know very quickly." Speaking of this, Gula smiled awkwardly. "But we haven't been aware of Yinjiao's movements." Gula was talking about the Yinjiao tribe suddenly bringing so many people out of the desert. They didn't find a reason, and this was something they had been wondering about. Looking at Xiao Xian, Gula saw that Xiao Xian didn't seem to want to explain. He coughed and continued. "Actually, after you brought so many people out of the desert, another group of people left not long after. They were people from Rock Hill City. When we first found out, we thought that the overlord of the desert, Rock Hill City, sent people out of the desert to eliminate the slave masters who escaped from the desert because they were moving in this direction. But until now, I haven't seen anyone from Rock Hill City nearby." Xiao Xian said. "Of course you haven't seen them, because they entered from the other side of the fearsome beast forest. They didn't enter from your side," Gula pointed out. The fearsome beast forest was huge, and Yinjiao's side was only a small area at the border of the forest. It was possible that someone entered the forest from another place, and Yinjiao didn't know. After all, from the time they brought people back to the old haunt until now, Yinjiao had only gone on one hunting expedition, and during this time, they only hunted for food nearby. If they didn't go deep into the forest, they naturally wouldn't know about other movements. "You mean Rock Hill City's goal is the fearsome beast forest?" Xiao Xian asked. "Not for the slave masters who escaped, not for Wansure, and not for Yinjiao, but just to enter the forest? It seemed like they're looking for something, but we don't know exactly what they're looking for. When you brought back the new species of food, some people guessed that you might have discovered the secret." Gula smiled bitterly. In the end, they were disappointed. Yinjiao had only found a new type of food. Xiao Xian lowered his eyes in deep thought. What could make the Sure family of Rock Hill City send people all the way into the fearsome beast forest? Gule's words revealed a lot of information, but most importantly, those people's goal might not be Yinjiao, but something in the fearsome beast forest. At the same time, Gula also sent a message that they wanted to cooperate with Yinjiao. Compared to the other tribes, they favored Yinjiao. After saying what he wanted to say, Gula stayed for a while and left. Xiaoxian also told the shaman and chief about what Gula said, so that they could prepare in advance. Chapter 530. It was almost the end of the year. Under normal circumstances, it was already autumn and the temperature should have dropped. However, the fearsome beast forest was still active. There was no sign of autumn. In fact, the weather was even hotter. This time last year, it was the same. The old shaman sat on a rock and looked at the forest in the distance. He sighed. No, this year is hotter than last year. The unusual changes in the weather made people uneasy. Fortunately, they were much calmer this year because of last year's experience. Plus, the two divisions of the Yinjiao tribe had reunited this year. It could calm people down and boost their morale. If there were any problems, they could solve it together. After experiencing the unusually cold winter on the other side of the sea, Zheng Luo and the others felt uncomfortable. But it was better to be warm than to be frozen, right? The warm weather also had its disadvantages. The animals in the forest, which should have started to wilt, were all unusually active. These flying insects were only one of them. When hunters entered the forest to hunt, they could clearly feel that these ferocious beasts had no intention of staying through the winter. They were quite energetic. Poisonous snakes and insects were also a problem. What's going on over there? The old shaman walked over with a taut face. She looked at a group of people rushing out of the forest not far away. Kiki, what's going on over there? The old shaman stopped Kiki, who was running away. Hearing the shaman call him, Kiki rushed over to explain. Shaman, I heard there are a lot of insects eating the cabbages in the fields outside. The chief is so angry that he wants us to help. A lot of insects? The two shamans were shocked. The first thing they thought of was the veins of the sky planted in the forest. They hurried to the fields to check, afraid that there would be insects there. The good thing was that there was not a single flying insect in the area where the veins of the sky were planted. Even underground, there were very few insects. These veins of the sky seemed to be naturally resistant to insects. Of course, this was only limited to the unbroken veins of the sky. Seeing this, the two shamans calmed down. They waved Kiki to go outside to help kill the insects. There were many things planted in the fields. Some had not sprouted, some had just sprouted. The ones that suffered the most were the cabbages. If it was in the past, those bugs wouldn't be so active. Worry appeared in the shaman's eyes. Excluding last year's situation, at this time of the year, under normal circumstances, many of the insects in the forest would be preparing for winter and would not fly around in groups. Ever since the people of Yinjiao came here, they had never encountered such an insect disaster. Perhaps it was because of the weather, but these insects that had no intention of staying through the winter all came out to move around, as if they were welcoming another spring. In addition, Yinjiao's expansion of farmland outside the forest attracted a lot of flying insects. Previously, they had only seen a small wave of flying insects occasionally. The people guarding the fields could still handle it, but now that there were so many of them, they could not handle it. They could only rely on the help of more soldiers. When Xiaoxian arrived, the farm was in chaos. Swords, sabers, sticks, hammers, and so on were all huddled together noisily. Those flying insects were more than 20 centimeters long. Xiaoxian swatted one down with his sword and pinched it to take a look. It was a light green, flying insect with a slight tinge of yellow. It had two large compound eyes, a slightly wide chest, a slender abdomen, and two pairs of almost transparent wings with crisscrossing net-like patterns. It had 5 pairs of slender legs with sharp claws. The front pair of legs were used for catching. When it landed on a leaf, these slender claws could firmly hold on to the leaf, preventing it from falling. These flying insects also had chewing mouth parts, so they could chew leaves very quickly. It was these flying insects that made the soldiers in the tribe so anxious that they wanted to fly into flames. They could handle large, ferocious beasts, but when faced with so many small flying insects, they could not handle them all at once. Moreover, when these flying insects flew high, it became harder for them to kill them. Using arrows? That was not suitable either. These flying insects could not fly too high, but after all, the soldiers could not fly. Even if they could jump a little higher, it would be difficult for them to kill the insects. Sometimes, when there were too many insects, there would be too many people. When killing the insects, some people would jump into the air and crash into them. Not only did they not kill the insects, but they also made their own people dizzy. Someone thought of pulling a net, but the area of the farmland was too big. It was impossible to cover all the land in one go. Moreover, unless the seams of the net were made smaller, it would be useless against these flying insects. They could squeeze through the seams of the net. It was not easy to get rid of this wave of insects, and the busy people finally took a break. Someone went to weave a net. We can cover another batch today, but it's not a good idea to keep doing this. Mai looked at the gnawed leaves and said angrily. Xiaoxian also thought about it. Farming had to let the crops see Yangguang. A net that was too dense could block some flying insects, but it would also block Yangguang. It was not a safe method. Spraying pesticides? Not to mention that they had not developed it yet. Even if they did, no one could guarantee that the descendants of the dead insects would be healthy. The conditions were limited, and there was no way to study the ratio more precisely. It's up to us. Kiki, who was sitting at the side and panting, was sweating profusely. He had never felt that killing insects was so tiring. They had to kill the flying insects and pay attention not to step on the things planted in the ground. It was really difficult. Some people used a thick wooden board to hit the insects, but the effect was limited. You can make some small holes on the board and then cut the bottom of the board to make a handle. That way, it's easier to hold, Xiaoxian said. The eyes of the warrior holding the board lit up. He felt that this method was feasible, and then he took out his tools and started to cut the board. Some people were cleaning up the mess, picking up the dead insects on the ground and putting them together. Because the stupid birds they raised did not eat these insects, and the other animals they raised were mostly vegetarians, they made the dead insects into fertilizer to fertilize the land. This also made the people in the tribe feel relieved. Little bug, come on. In the end, didn't you become fertilizer for the land? Xiaoxian looked around and walked back into the forest. He wanted to go to the casting room. It was nighttime. Because the cabbage in the field was no longer a secret, the surrounding area was not too tightly guarded. After experiencing the insect disaster during the day, the warriors guarding the farmland were a little tired. A figure sneaked in with the night, like a thin leaf blown by the wind. It lightly flipped over the wooden fence around the cabbage field and landed on the ground with a slight sound. After the black shadow landed on the ground, it listened carefully to make sure that it did not attract the attention of the people guarding the farmland. Then it floated up again and landed on a cabbage like a butterfly. It left as soon as it touched the cabbage. There was only a short chi sound, which sounded like an inconspicuous insect. Still, no one paid attention to it. Hiding in the shadow of a cabbage taller than a person, the man took a cut leaf to his nose and sniffed it. This small leaf was cut from a cabbage ball near the middle. He had heard from the people in Yinjiao that the leaves near the middle of the cabbage ball were crisper and tasted better. He had been watching for a few days and wanted to come and try the newly discovered vegetables in Yinjiao. Today, he finally had the chance. He was a vegetarian and did not like meat. He put the small leaf in his mouth and tasted it. After chewing it carefully, he felt that it was quite good. It was crispy and fresh. After hiding for so long, he finally got something he was satisfied with. The two moons in the sky cast moonlight that was not very bright. From time to time, there were clouds blocking the light. The guards who glanced inside did not notice that under a cabbage leaf taller than a person, there was a person hiding in the shadow that was darker than the night. After eating the leaf, the man looked around. When he jumped up, he quickly glanced around. Even though it was very dark, he could still see his surroundings clearly. He remembered that there was a bigger cabbage not far away, much bigger than the other cabbages around it. When he jumped up, he saw it from the corner of his eye. He decided to start with the biggest cabbage. He wondered how the people in Yinjiao would react when they found out that the biggest cabbage in the field was missing a cabbage ball in the middle. Thinking about it, he was looking forward to it. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.